Today I got a cold main character and all the meanings of the word. This kid right here is the province prodigy. Noble blood, top talent, the kind of guy who's never been told no in his life. And right now he's got his sword out over an ice cream line. The vendor girl told him to go to the back. He didn't like that, so Rule from the association steps in front of her, and tells him the rules don't bend for nobles either. And this dude decides the correct response is taking Rule's head off. The blade comes down and it just stops. This long-haired killer blocked with bare arms. So, what happens when you take the strongest man from a world built on the survival of the fittest, and drop him into a place with magic, swords, and nobles who've never been hit in their lives? The prodigy pours mana into his blade and charges. Our boy just steps aside again, slips past every single swing while cleaning his ear. And when the kid finally connects, he's cutting an after image. Then he tells him the truth. Where he comes from, the strong survive, and that's the whole rule. He gathers ki at the tip of one finger and flicks it. The kid's hand bursts open, blood everywhere, sore on the ground, and his fingers are already turning purple. And this poor guy wasn't the first victim. Since arriving here, this guy only does 3 things. He walks around beating everyone, eats ice cream, and rizzes up daughters. Because at some point, even the princess of the kingdom apologizes to him for something that wasn't her fault. And he tells her, "Kiss me to make me feel better." She pulls him and kisses him. Nah, bro is playing this game on beginner mode with auto assist. Why girls don't make faces like that to me? But see, before any of this, this man had already won. He sold Mudok, Lord of the North Sea Ice Palace, and he fought a 6-year war across an entire continent and came out the absolute ruler of all of it. But the woman he loved didn't make it there with him. Her name was Huyong, and her father was the man on the other side of that war. When she chose him over her own bloodline, that man reached out his hand, told her he'd forgive her, gave her one last chance to come home. She asked him one thing: if she came back, would he let the others live? He said nothing. Then he drove his sword through his own daughter and told the field he no longer had one. Sial killed him for it, took the continent, became the most powerful man alive, and then went home, sat in his garden, and felt absolutely nothing. Because of the flower, the love lotus, a flower that only blooms when 2 people genuinely love each other. Hers bloomed for them, and when she died, it died with her. Then 3 years later, it opened again. He tore the country apart looking for someone who could explain it. And when every wise man in the region was standing in his garden, one old man gave him the only answer that fit: reincarnation. She'd been born again, somewhere, and the lotus would glow when he finally stood in the same place as her. So he searched, 3 years and 5 months. Across every corner of the land he ruled, and she wasn't in any of it, which left the sea. And out on that water, a storm came out of nowhere, a tsunami taller than the ship. He shields the crew, throws them planks with his ki alone, and then a second wave shows up bigger than the first. So he pulls his sword to freeze the entire ocean, and the necklace she gave him starts glowing. The one thing she said had the power to always bring him back to her. The light shoots into the sky, pulls the water, and the snow, and everything around it upward, and drags him straight up with it. Next thing he knows, he's wedged between crates in a stranger's carriage. Can't move, doesn't know how he got there, doesn't recognize a single voice outside. And that's how the absolute ruler of an entire world ends up in a new one. The last thing he remembers is fighting that storm at sea. Then he hears screams. The cries are coming from outside, so he gets ready to look. When he peeks out of the carriage, he sees people running from giant flies trying to catch them. Nearby, a young woman and a little girl are terrified as they watch people being killed by the monster. A man who looks like a scholar grips a large hatchet and says he'll save the girls, Savin and Yane. But before he can act, Soul slices through the carriage and one of the flies with it. Everyone is stunned. A man who seems to be a merchant is horrified that his first-class carriage got destroyed. But then someone tells them to look. From the dust, the protagonist's finger appears first. He realizes this looks like a forest somewhere outside the Central Plains. Then he suddenly turns to the side, noticing these people are probably foreigners. The 3 of them can hardly believe what they just saw, and Soul quickly figures out that means he's far from the Central Plains. But when he looks up, he sees the flies circling back to attack him. Once he gets a better look, he's shocked they're actually flies. And judging by his face, MC really does not like insects. He's confused. Foreigners, giant flies and chaos everywhere. What in the world is going on? One fly charges straight at him, but he dodges before it can strike his head. Then he uses the divine ice palm and kills it instantly. The fly bursts into pieces, leaving everyone amazed by Soul's strength. He coldly asks how some mere beast dares attack a human, like growing a little bigger somehow made it bold. To him, that's unforgivable, so he charges straight at the swarm. This time he's even more fierce, freezing every fly in the sky into ice crystals. Then he shatters them all with the divine ice palm. The people watching are left speechless, and Soul says that's more than enough for a bunch of pathetic bugs. The men there can't believe what they just saw, and neither can the girls. But then he notices something strange when they start talking. He can't understand a single word they're saying. It all sounds completely foreign to him. While the older man keeps speaking with excitement, the man bows his head in thanks. We can understand him, but Soul can't. He says he's deeply grateful for saving his merchant group and asks the name of his savior, calling him a magic swordsman. The protagonist asks what the man is saying. He can tell it's probably gratitude, but he apologizes and says he doesn't understand foreign languages. He asks if anyone there can speak the language of the Central Plains, but communication is nearly impossible since no one understands him either. MC starts to realize that while they all scratch their heads and talk among themselves, he asks again if anyone knows the Central Plains language, but still gets nothing. So now he's wondering how he's supposed to explain any of this. Then the older man says something to the guy with the pompadour behind him. That man hands over a ring and Soul is surprised by it, asking what exactly they're doing. The old man then starts some strange-looking ritual with the ring, using magic. Soul is clearly shaken watching it, and honestly anyone would be. Then somehow, the man starts speaking in a way he can finally understand, asking if he can hear him now. He notices the man is suddenly speaking the Central Plains language perfectly and asks if the ring did that. The old man confirms it and realizes the protagonist really does speak the language of the Central Plains. The man introduces himself again as Edmund Royal, head of the Royal Merchant Association. He thanks MC for saving his people and asks the name of his rescuer, calling him a magic swordsman. He says he has no idea what a magic swordsman is, but his name is his Mudok. Royal pauses, confused that he doesn't know the term. Royal explains that a magic swordsman is someone who fights with both a sword and magic, just like the protagonist. Soul asks what magic is, and that shocks the old man even more. After all, MC just used power right in front of him, yet he still doesn't know what magic is. Royal asks where in the world he came from. The more he listens, the less any of this makes sense, and he tries to press him for answers. Royal hesitates, wondering how to even begin explaining. That only makes the protagonist more annoyed. Soul snaps that he asked the question and wants an answer now, gathering ki into his palm like he's ready to finish the old man off. Royal is convinced this guy is completely insane. Since nobody knows what he'll do if he gets mad, Royal decides he'd better explain everything. So he quickly says he'll explain and asks MC to calm down. The explanation drags on so long that the sun goes down. By the time they're sitting around a fire, he finally starts to get it. In this region, there's something called magic, and he admits the world is bigger than he thought. Royal notices he's finally calmed down. Then Royal asks what the protagonist means by the Central Plains. Soul can't believe the question, and asks what he means. What are the Central Plains? He asks if Royal is seriously saying he doesn't know where they are right now. Royal is just as confused, and the two still aren't really connecting. MC says it makes no sense not to know the Central Plains while standing in them. Hearing that, Royal once again thinks this man is exactly what he seemed, a lunatic. Royal tells him they are not in the Central Plains. They're in a forest on the road to Bayam, the capital of the Drac Kingdom. He hates that answer and tells the foreigner to listen carefully. He says he's never heard anyone call the Central Plains the Drac Kingdom and asks if Royal is already losing his mind. Royal clearly doesn't like that and fires back that he's only 50. Still, what really bothers him is that the protagonist keeps insisting this place is the Central Plains even after everything. The protagonist doesn't like being challenged either, so MC says they should ask the boy hiding behind the tree. The kid jolts when he realizes he's been found. Royal turns to him surprised he's there and asking why, but he cuts straight to the real issue. He asks the boy if this place is the Central Plains or Drac, ordering him to answer honestly. The boy just stays silent. The protagonist's tone gets harsher, demanding to know why he isn't answering. Royal steps in and explains that no matter what the protagonist says, Leo can't understand his words. He tells Soul to take the ring, put it on and shout. Language, interpretation. Royal knows lending such an expensive magic item to this man is a waste, but he's not about to keep getting treated like some senile old fool. MC does it and activates the language spell. Letters swirl out from the ring and spread over his body. Right away he can hear and understand the foreigners. Even he has to admit that kind of sorcery is amazing. He turns back to the boy and asks his name. The boy introduces himself as Leo. Sol immediately asks whether this place is the Central Plains or somewhere called Drac. Leo has no clue what he means and asks what the Central Plains even are. He says this is a forest on the road leading to Bam, capital of the Drac Kingdom. The protagonist stares at him and asks if the kid is senile too. Then he asks Royal if he told the child to say that. Royal says absolutely not, and if MC still doubts him, he can ask everyone in the merchant group. Seeing Royal's reaction, Sola starts to realize he probably isn't lying. That means this really isn't the Central Plains, and once he starts thinking about it, he remembers fighting a storm on a ship before this. Then when he opened his eyes, he was already inside a carriage. So he starts wondering if he was somehow teleported, and the truth begins to hit him. He is left wondering if he somehow crossed space itself, completely stunned. At that point, he accepts that this really is the Drac Kingdom, not his Central Plains. The realization shakes him, and then he feels something strange in his body. He asks what that odd feeling in his dantian was just now, and Royal asks if he finally believes him. So Royal realizes this energy is unlike anything he has ever felt before. Something is wrong, that much is clear. He gets to his feet, then he rushes off, leaving Royal behind. Royal can only call after him, asking where he's going. The protagonist thinks he has to check this for himself. That pure energy proves this place is completely different from the Central Plains. He leaps up from a rock and rises high above the forest, using ki to stay in the air while he looks over everything. He gathers ki into his palm first, then unleashes a massive attack. It tears open across the sky, and Sol realizes the amount of ki in his dantian has doubled. Even so, he keeps asking how he ended up here instead of the Central Plains. As he comes down, he remembers he has to find Wyan as fast as possible. Then he remembers the item hanging from his neck. He wonders if that light from the necklace back then is what caused this. He recalls Wyan saying the necklace had the power to return to the person who gave it. So if he was sent here, maybe it was to find her. That means she might be here too, and the thought gives him a bit of hope. Meanwhile, back with Royal's group, everyone is asking what that was and where the magic swordsman went. Royal is still exhausted and says who knows where he could have gone. Seagull is completely unpredictable. Then MC suddenly comes back and addresses everyone. He says he had something to check for a moment, and now he has a question. Royal is interested right away, though he also wonders why he is suddenly wearing such a scary smile. The protagonist asks if what Leo said was true, that this place really is the Drac Kingdom. Royal says yes. If they keep going a little farther, they'll reach Bam, the kingdom's capital. Seagull asks where exactly that is. One of the kids nearby realizes MC truly knows nothing about this place and laughs, saying he must have spent his whole life training in the mountains. The boy says he's heard stories about strange people like him, but this is his first time seeing one in real life. He goes along with it, laughs, and says the kid's right. He was training in the mountains and only came out today to see the world. That's why he knows nothing. As he thinks about Bam and the Drac Kingdom, he admits he's never heard of either and figures the boy might help him learn more. He also notices some of them have different colored eyes, so maybe this is one of those western barbarian lands he only heard about. The boy proudly says he knew it and asks if he should teach the protagonist a few things. He says he'd like that. The boy starts acting like MC should follow his lead, and MC just plays along. Sol asks the boy's name and he says it's Luffy. Then the narration cuts itself off like a joke. The boy quickly asks for his name too. Meanwhile, Royal wonders why the protagonist suddenly became so friendly. If anything, that only makes him more unsettling. He really is impossible to predict. That night, Sol starts learning from Luffy about this place and the language people use here. And as hard as it is to believe, this isn't just a foreign land, it's a completely different world. The shape of the land is strange. The writing is nothing like the script from the Central Plains, and the map leaves MC more shocked by the minute. He learns that this world has other races too, like elves and dwarves, and even beings similar to beastmen. Out of all those races, the strongest are creatures called dragons, basically giant winged lizards or something like that. Then he hears about things like magic casting and magic circles. Luffy explains that only mages above the 5th circle can use long-distance warp magic. They draw a magic circle on the ground, chant a spell, and travel wherever they want. The more skilled the mage, the farther they can go. He doesn't fully get it yet, but he can tell this world has all kinds of strange powers that don't follow his old logic. He starts wondering what other amazing things this world might have for him, and that only makes him more excited. While the protagonist is thinking, Luffy keeps talking excitedly until the protagonist notices something else. This world has 3 moons. At that point he has to admit it. This place is completely different from anywhere in the Central Plains. He wonders if Huyin really was the one who summoned him here. Then a man suddenly shouts at someone named Vina, telling her not to do it. That instantly grabs Sail's attention, and he asks what that noise is. He looks over and realizes it's coming from nearby. Then a girl with a mark on her neck asks what that man means by that. She warns everyone not to come any closer, or she'll kill them all. Panic spreads as people try to calm Sabina down, and from a distance, MC wonders what's going on. Charles tells her that once they reach the capital, both girls can be treated. There are plenty of mages there, and he'll even ask Edmonds for help. Then he gently asks if she's alright, since Annie is terrified, but the girl snaps back, asking if he takes her for a fool. Even in the capital, healers are rare, and if they do find one, the price will be huge. She explains that a deadly fly egg is lodged in her heart, and could hatch into a larva at any moment. How is anyone supposed to heal that? Charles has no answer. Through tears, she says that once the egg hatches, she'll be torn away from Annie, still holding the knife to the girl's neck. To her, dying now would be better than dying like that. Then Serge speaks up and tells her to wait. He says he understands the situation a little, then raises his hand and uses his cold key. Everyone is stunned. When he reaches for the knife, he tells her he'll treat her and that she should put the dagger away, then takes it from her hand before she can react. She's shocked and asks when he even did that. He just walks over and tells the girls to come to him and sit down fast. The treatment has to start right away. Royal asks if the protagonist knows healing magic too, but the protagonist says no. He doesn't use magic, he only knows a few healing methods from where he came from. He tells everyone to stay calm for now, and hope starts to come back. Charles begs him to save the girls. He says he has little to offer, but he'll repay him with all his heart. MC says he was going to help anyway. Then he says he's starting now, so everyone needs to step back a little. They agree. Royal orders everyone to move back while he approaches the frightened girls. He tells them they don't need to be so tense, and says it won't take long. Once both girls sit down, he tells them to close their eyes and relax. Then he places his key into the girls' back and examines both of them from the inside. He finds the insect eggs near their hearts. Using his key, he checks carefully and pinpoints the exact spot of both eggs. Sitting behind them, he begins the treatment. Luckily, the eggs haven't hatched yet, so if he controls his energy well and burns the eggs without harming the heart, this might work. He starts sending his cold key into their bodies, striking right at the eggs near their hearts. The sudden feeling startles the girls. Then Soul pulls his hand away from her back. That ends the treatment. The sickness is gone, and the girls stare in shock, asking if it's really over. The protagonist says he destroyed all the insect eggs, so they can relax now. Royal lights up and asks if that's true. He quickly asks if Annie and Sabina are really alright now, while Leah wonders if it's all finished. MC says yes. He adds that there won't be any side effects, so they have nothing to worry about. The girls immediately thank him, calling him their savior. Everyone bows their heads to Soul, overjoyed, and he just greets them back. After that, he moves off to the side and sits in the carriage, saying it's been a long day. He thinks about how much he misses her, especially the woman he loves. He hopes they can meet again soon. Sometime later, the merchant caravan gets moving again toward its destination. Royal complains about how insanely hot it is, saying he feels like he's melting under the sun. Soul agrees. It's so scorching that even he ties his hair up. Luffy walks over and offers him some water. The protagonist accepts and thanks him, even though the water is warm. He thinks that if he releases a little ice energy, he can cool it down. Luffy says it's way too hot and asks if he's okay. Soul says this makes it better, but then Luffy hears a strange sound coming from the bottle and asks what it is. MC presses the now frozen bottle against him, and the boy is shocked by how cold it is. He tells him to take it. Luffy asks why it's so cold, and he just tells him to try some. The moment he drinks it, he realizes it's ice-cold water and gets really excited. The protagonist smiles at his reaction, and Luffy eagerly asks if he can chill his bottle too. Soul thinks that's fine. The kid has helped him a lot, so this much is easy to do for him. So he uses his ice power to help the boy, but then he notices everyone standing around him. They all want cold water too, holding out their bottles with shining eyes. Soul knows it isn't hard, but if he says yes to everyone, it could turn into more trouble. Then Royal comes up behind them and asks what's going on. He looks around and tells them to explain. Luffy says the magic swordsman made some cold water, and once the others saw it, everybody wanted some. Royal repeats cold water and looks at Cell with greedy interest. MC asks what the problem is. Royal actually kneels and politely says he'd like some cold water too, dropping all pride. Seeing that, he can hardly believe it, but gives in and tells him to hand over the bottle. He figures staying with the caravan is the best way to learn more about this world. For now, he already solved the biggest issue dealing with the language barrier, so giving out cold water isn't a big deal. At least that's what he thinks. Then as Royal drinks, he suddenly says this is strange. He asks the protagonist how he made this ice. The protagonist asks why he wants to know and whether something's wrong. Royal says it's perfect. He's tried all kinds of ice across the continent, but never anything like this. He says it's on another level, truly amazing, and calls MC incredible. He can only think isn't ice just frozen water, so he asks if the ice really tastes that good, saying all he did was freeze water. Royal insists it does taste different, and Cell wonders what he means by that. Royal explains that making ice usually means using Manhwa's cold power to freeze water directly, or pulling moisture from the air. During that process, Manhwa impurities mix into the ice, which changes the taste. Since every mage's Manhwa has its own signature, truly pure ice is rare. That's why good ice is hard to get, but the protagonist's ice is unbelievably pure, and that's why it tastes so good. MC thinks it over and realizes he gets it now. That explains why everyone reacted so strongly. He almost feels bad for them, seeing people get this excited over something as simple as ice. In a good mood, he decides to make some more, and starts gathering even more cold energy around himself. But Royal quickly calls out to him, and Cell asks what the merchant wants now. Royal raises a hand and says he has a proposal for him. A few days later, they arrive at a city. Charlie tells two workers to hold the goods tight, and carry them to the back of the shop. Meanwhile, Cell is using his cold key to fill buckets with ice, and they're selling it like it's some amazing treasure. People love it, and praise Cell for making such high-quality ice. They keep pushing for more, though Mudok doesn't look too happy about what the protagonist is doing. A few days earlier, MC had asked Royal what exactly he meant. Was he saying he wanted to rebuild his merchant group by selling his ice? Royal says that's basically it. The protagonist realizes that's why Royal kept talking about how refreshing ice is, and how rare ice mages are. He'd been planning this the whole time. Royal had explained that even fourth circle mages who can make ice are usually too arrogant, and their ice quality is poor anyway, so there's a market opening here. He figures Royal really does want to save his struggling merchant group, but he also knows the man isn't naive. So MC says he won't do it for free. They should negotiate. He wants a 70-30 split. Royal freezes for a second, and MC explains that since he's the one making the ice while Royal only sells it, MC gets 70% of the profit and Royal gets 30%. Royal thinks it over. Since the ice will sell fast, it's not a bad offer. Still, there's no harm in trying to bargain a little more. He points out that selling ice takes carts for transport, workers to move them, and mages to keep the ice from melting. In short, the startup costs are pretty big, so if Soul can make a small concession, they'll be set. Mudok falls for it and offers 60-40. He asks if that's really the best he can do, but seeing he won't get more, he moves on to drawing up the contract. The protagonist thinks back and remembers he only agreed because this seemed like a good way to learn about the world, but the business is doing even better than he expected, and people are buying the ice almost instantly. Then Charlie comes running over, calling for Royal, saying he needs to step out for a moment. The protagonist quickly asks what's going on. Outside, a crowd is already making a lot of noise. They all know the cold dessert is being sold there and beg to buy some ice too. One of them introduces himself as Arnold from Neri City and says he came to do business with the Royal Merchant Association. Royal tells everyone to calm down, be quiet, and line up while he tries to handle the mess. But nobody is listening, and the protagonist steps in and sends his cold Kia over everyone's heads, shocking the whole crowd into silence. His voice hits them right inside their minds, ordering them to shut up. Royal realizes the protagonist just saved him, and he tells everyone to stay silent inside the shop. If they get loud again, every single one of them will be thrown out. No exceptions. Seriously, the protagonist's presence is just insane. The crowd has no choice but to quietly agree. Royal explains that his association only sells in bulk. Anyone here for a small amount will have to leave. Maybe they can do smaller sales later, but not now. A woman protests that they came from far away, and another man asks why he can't just sell a little. The protagonist gets annoyed again and lets out a bit more cold K just to scare them. That shuts them up fast, and they realize the trip was for nothing, complaining that they came all the way there for this. Seeing that, the protagonist gives them a sarcastic goodbye, while Royal tells everyone else to line up properly. One says he's from the Mage Merchant Association, another is Benjamin Butler to the Count Slave family, and a third represents the Arista family. Royal realizes Mage is one of the 10 biggest merchant groups on the continent, and along with Count Slave's house, other noble families are here too. He knew they could make money, but he never expected luck this good. Meanwhile, the protagonist couldn't care less. Royal knows all of this is thanks to him, and admits that, even if the Royal Merchant Association still hasn't fully recovered, none of this would have happened without Mudok. Then he tells the protagonist he should go rest. Mudok asks if the busiest part is over, and Royal says yes, he can handle the rest from here. The protagonist simply agrees, and wishes Royal good luck. As the protagonist walks away, Royal thinks that even if he feels bad for using him, he has his reasons for rebuilding this merchant association. It's to avenge his parents and siblings who died unfairly. He has to fully restore the merchant association, and then use the Royal Association to get revenge on Duke Icarus, the man who ruined them through the House Merchant Association. Until that day, he won't give up, and he asks the protagonist to keep helping him. When he succeeds, he swears he'll reward him. The protagonist lies down, saying he's really tired. Business is going well, and the money keeps coming in. He figures he should start gathering information about Ian Street soon. Then someone knocks on the door. He asks who it is, and the answer is Savina. He asks if it's already snack time, and tells her to come in. He notices she finally brought it. It's ice cream, his favorite snack right now. It's a treat made by mixing ice and fruit, and Savina, a girl he met not long ago, invented it by accident. He thanks her for bringing it again, and says he's going to enjoy it. She brushes it off like it's nothing. As he gets ready to eat, he thinks about how cold, sweet, and smooth it tastes, a flavor he never imagined he'd find in the North Sea. He's heard the Royal Association is doing even better because of this ice cream, and honestly, he totally gets why. As he keeps eating, he realizes he's already finished, and decides one is definitely not enough. He doesn't feel like going to get more himself, but everyone else is busy, so he drags himself over anyway. On the way, he wonders why it's so noisy again. Savina's arguing with some people and telling one of them not to do that, and to go to the back of the line. But of course, some spoiled rich brat asks how she dares order nobles around. Watching the scene, the protagonist wonders who these idiots are. A little earlier that afternoon, when those fools first showed up, they talked down to the girl, acting like she clearly had no idea who they were, and ordered her to shut up and hand over that ice cream or whatever they were selling. Then one of them says they heard the rumors and kindly decided to stop by, warning her she better hope it tastes good. But she tells them the Royal Association doesn't sell ice cream to anyone who cuts the line. She asks them to understand, and one noble slams the table, asking if she's saying nobles have to line up like commoners. He rants that it's already bad enough being in the same place as peasants, and now she wants him to stand in line with them too. From a distance, the protagonist just watches. Savina says nobles don't get served first, just because they're nobles. He makes her repeat herself, asking if she's really challenging a noble. Even then, she stands firm. The protagonist changes his mind. If things go bad, he'll definitely step in and save her. She fires back that this isn't some challenge, she's just following the rules. That ugly delinquent gets mad and says she must really want to die. As he draws his sword, Savina stays surprisingly calm, even while he says he's going to kill her. Then the other one who seems calmer stops Samuel and tells him not to be reckless, his eyes charged with mana. He asks if Samuel wants to throw away his dignity, so the boy apologizes. Savina tries to say something to him, but he cuts in first and says they came to try the ice cream. That cold stare makes her feel like her heart is freezing. She tries to respond, but he says he hates waiting and orders her to hurry and bring it now. He puts strange pressure on her mind, and she starts trembling while asking him to wait. But then Roel shouts for Savina to stop and reminds her that the Merchant Association does not sell to line cutters. He asks if she forgot that, and she apologizes while bowing her head to Roel. Watching them, the protagonist notices Roel's strong reaction and figures there must be something going on between them. Roel then orders the nobles to leave, saying he can't allow anyone to disrespect the rules of trade. The arrogant noble keeps talking back, calling this reckless, and asks if Roel really dares insult nobles again. Roel says he has it wrong. The reason he wants to sell him ice cream isn't just because he cut the line. The two glance at each other, and the one who tried using magic asks what the real reason is. Roel tells him to ask Duke Icarus himself. Everyone in the association is shocked that Roel actually brought up Duke Icarus. The young noble asks if Roel knows his father. After looking closer, he says Roel seems familiar. Those eyes trigger his memory, and he starts to understand. Roel must be one of the leftover survivors from the Roel Merchant Association. His face turns frightening. That kid definitely looks like he's killed someone before. The nobles with him notice the smile on his face and say that's the smile. Justin makes when he's angry, so he declares that for insulting a noble, Rule will pay with his life. Still wearing that creepy grin, he draws his sword, then he raises his hand to cut down Rule, and Rule is terrified, hating that he still can't avenge his family, but the protagonist's ice takes over the scene. The blade stops before it can hit, and the protagonist steps in front of Rule, blocking it with his bare arms. Rule is stunned by that, while the protagonist casually knocks the sword aside and sends Justin flying back several meters. Justin demands to know how he dares, calling him trash and saying Mudok must have a death wish. The protagonist thinks this had to happen right when he came out for more ice cream. All they did was tell these guys they don't sell the line cutters, and they jumped straight to trying to kill people. Calmly cleaning his ear, he says this is beyond ridiculous. He adds that young people these days really have no manners. Justin asks what he means, and the protagonist says he might as well use this chance to teach him some. Justin gets even angrier and keeps calling the protagonist trash while pouring mana into his sword. Then he charges in, shouting that he'll kill him. He rushes the protagonist at full speed, spinning around as he swings. Mudok simply steps aside. On the next strike, he dodges with ease, smiling as he slips past every attack and mocking Justin by saying that almost scared him. Justin keeps slashing over and over, but nothing lands. Mudok admits the boy's talent is impressive for someone so young, but no matter how many times he swings, Justin's sword will never touch him. He proves it by avoiding everything with small, calm movements. Then he says nobility should come with reason and balance. If Justin's actions represent nobles, then nobles have no virtue at all. Still, he says he's not narrow-minded, so today he'll fix Justin's manners. Justin finally lands a hit, but only on an after-image the protagonist left behind. Justin calls him trash again and demands to know how he dares talk to a noble like that. Honestly, he's unbearable with this noble talk. The protagonist says words won't fix him. What he needs is discipline. As Justin swings, he slips past the attack and stops right beside him. Then he says this reminds him of who he used to be back on the Central Plains. He adds that his promise to Hwoyong made him forget how the world works. But in the end, it all comes down to one rule: the strong survive. With that, he gathers Kit at the tip of his finger, getting ready to flick it out. He fires that formless Kit straight at Justin's hand. Part of Justin's arm bursts open, blood spraying everywhere. He's almost in tears when he sees the huge hole through his wrist. His hand opens on its own, the sword drops, and he falls screaming to the ground, staring at the wound. A second later, his hand starts turning purple from the freezing ki. Once again, the prota shows just how overwhelming his aura is. Roy blurts out, asking what that attack even was. Meanwhile, the prota heads toward the other arrogant nobles, and now they're scared out of their minds. They tell him to stop right there, warning that if he comes any closer, they'll cut him down. One of them repeats that he already told Mudok not to come any nearer. He tries to glare at him like a killer, but the real surprise is Justin getting back up. The prota asks why he bothered rising when he could have stayed on the ground. Justin orders the other guy to move, leaving his friend stunned. So once again, Mudok stands face to face with him. The prota says this is getting fun. Justin is putting on quite a show, and he starts smiling like he's enjoying the fight. Then he shrugs and says fine, if that's how Justin wants it. More icy ki gathers at his fingertips as he says he wants to see how long Justin can keep going. You might not agree with me, but this protagonist is insanely good, and I'm not even the type to hype up main characters. A moment later, the prota turns serious, and that noble suddenly sees Justin flying through the air. Justin crashes back down, badly hurt, while the prota lowers a hand wrapped in icy ki like it took just one motion. The other two rush in, asking if Justin is okay, and begging him to hang on, since he's got more holes torn through his body. Then they notice his wrist and can't believe what they're seeing. The prota thinks that even while only using the strength of a first-rate martial artist, Justin still turned out weaker than expected. That makes him wonder if he should stop. He doesn't fully know this place yet, so he can't just kill someone without thinking. So he tells himself it's fine, he can't go around killing people on the spot. Justin changes his tone and demands to know who the prota is, shocked that someone thinks he can act like this. Then he shouts, asking if he has any idea who Justin von Whitecross is. The prota starts to realize this guy is hopeless. Instead of learning anything, he's still full of himself. So that first thought comes back, should he kill him or not? But he calms down, because that would make him no different from them. Even so, the others keep yelling, asking if he really thinks he can get away with laying hands on a noble and demanding an answer. The prota decides there's something better than killing them. Something way more humiliating. Then he spots a small stick behind them and thinks, perfect. A creepy grin spreads across his face as he picks it up and uses telekinetic control. Justin can't believe what he's seeing, and the others wonder if this guy is some kind of magic swordsman. The Proto pours sword energy into that tiny stick, and cold air starts pouring off him. Justin stares and asks what he's even doing. Then the Proto uses sword sphere. They panic and tell him not to come closer, repeating that they already warned him. He answers by releasing his sword, Kensik. All three start shaking in fear because they know they have no chance. He says that for brats like them, a beating is the best cure, raising the stick and adding that he's holding back. Then he starts thrashing all three of them. He keeps saying he's being very careful not to overdo it. The way he beats them feels like a mom disciplining her kids. The three boys scream and keep screaming until much later that night. They finally admit they were wrong and beg him to stop. One after another, they apologize and swear they won't do it again. The Proto asks what they're even talking about. He says he can't hear a word they're saying and makes them repeat it, leaving all three stunned. Jason especially swears he'll kill him one day. He'll make sure to take his head and stomp on it. But then he yells something totally different, saying the Proto was right and promising he'll never make a mistake like today's. Again, the Proto thinks he already knew that. No matter where you go, nothing works better than a solid beating. Then he tells them to be more careful from now on, and asks if they understand. Royale is left completely shocked by what the Proto did, and thanks him over and over. Then the next day, several nobles gather for a meeting. They say they recently received a report from an informant in the Kingdom of Serbia, Karol Konzlajev. King Tomalov III tells him to begin. Karol reports that the Kingdom of Serbia has retaken the northern Blackstone area, and on top of that, the Kingdom of Hazen seems to be developing land beyond the Sahara Desert. Duke Sergio von Icarus asks about that land, saying he heard it's too dangerous for humans because of the monsters. He wants to know if Hazen has some special method. Karol says he isn't sure yet, but he suspects Ainz may have joined them. The king is clearly surprised when he hears Ainz's name, and Count Crash asks if that's really true. Karol says yes. Then Baron Arista asks if he means Ainz, one of the continent's 10 sword masters. He says he's heard Ainz turns down every offer of money. The king adds that Ainz usually wanders the continent without serving any side. So why would someone like that end up in Hazen? One noble guesses that if it wasn't money, maybe he fell in love. The king says that actually sounds likely. At that, everyone is stunned. The king asks who he fell for, and they answer that it's someone they all know very well. It's Princess Daphne, the younger sister of King Leard, II of Hazen, and Kirill confirms it. One of them asks if that means Leard, the man who treats his little sister like his most precious treasure, really gave her to him. Another says the king's schemes may finally be paying off. The king then points out that if this is true, Hazen now has 2 sword masters. Kirill agrees and says they'll probably push to expand even more, since that goal has slipped from their hands again and again since Laterdy II's reign. He goes on to say that Hazen is expanding in the east, the commercial kingdom of Serbia is developing land in the south, and the Java Empire is growing across the Western Sea. They can't just sit still, so the king asks everyone to share their ideas. One noble says it might help if they also expanded their territory, but the king points out they don't have any good land left to take. He asks if the man is suggesting they cross the Laser Mountains to the north. Sergio says yes, they have no other choice, but everyone knows expanding north would be hard, and even if they succeed, the whole region is covered in ice, making the effort nearly worthless. The king grows more uneasy, because going north would basically mean being pushed out of the real power struggle. So of course everyone hesitates. He figures that before long someone will be sent north to deal with the issue of expansion. Then the king ends the meeting and says they'll gather again another time. As they leave Sergio thinks the count and his majesty are probably hiding something. And he's right. The two of them head off to a private room to talk in secret. The king asks Slave whether he's made any mistakes lately, and Slave says he hasn't. The king says the duke must be plotting again. For 10 years now, anyone who dared oppose him has been sent north, and he blames his own failures for letting it happen. But the king tells him not to say that, because out of all his vassals, Slave is the only one he truly trusts. That clearly moves Slave. Then the king changes the subject. He says he heard rumors about a kind of ice being sold in the capital, and asks if Slave knows anything about it. Slave realizes he means the ice cream from the royal company. The king asks about the ice cream, and Slave explains that it's different from normal ice, so sweet that people gave it that name. Then the king asks how late the company stays open, and Slave says he believes they stay open pretty late. Slave starts thinking the king must want to try it. If that's the case, he says he can take him there, since he was already planning to head out and they could stop by. The king likes that idea and smiles. He says, As expected, Slave read his mind. Slave replies that it's only natural for him to understand what the king wants. The king gets straight to it and asks exactly when they're leaving. Sometime later, at the company, everyone is excited and asks the prota to teach them magic. He just stares at them like, "What are you all talking about?" while eating his ice cream. Then Slavia apologizes for showing up so suddenly. She says they know it's not proper, and they also understand that not everyone can learn magic, but they say they have to learn no matter what. The little girl agrees. If the company is in danger again like last time, it could end badly. She promises to train hard and begs him to teach them. They ask for his power, but he tells the kids their determination is great. Still, like he said before, he isn't a mage, and what he uses is something else. Luffy asks if it's some kind of martial art. He says yes, that's exactly it, and Luffy remembered right. He explains that it isn't magic at all, it's martial arts, and to be exact, the skill he uses is called the Divine Ice Palm. Since he doesn't know magic, he can't teach it, so Leo cuts right to it. Then why not teach them martial arts instead? That catches him off guard, and he just stares, wondering what the boy is even saying. Sabina thinks it's an amazing idea, and the others get excited too. Now they all ask him to teach them, and he has no clue how to respond. Then he looks into their honest eyes. They truly want to learn, and their will to reach that goal is strong. Seeing all the kids so fired up, he starts thinking about his own childhood. Back then, he had also begged his master to teach him martial arts. He knows he should be finding Hoyoung as soon as possible, so taking students feels wrong. Still, these kids want to protect someone too. More than that, they've helped him in all kinds of ways, even though they barely know him. By the rules, he shouldn't pass on the Northern Sea martial arts so easily. But this is a different world, and Sabina keeps begging him, so he says he'll think about it. If they come back tomorrow at the same time, he'll have an answer. That makes all of them happy. Luffy asks if he really means it. Leo thanks him, and says they'll never forget his kindness, even after they die. He quickly tells them to wait. What he meant was that he's only going to think about it, but they're already celebrating, convinced they'll get to learn martial arts. He can't even explain himself and wonders how things turned into this. Then he thinks maybe he was the same at their age, and his master must have had a hard time with him too. Kids really are loud. Then he hears a metallic sound and looks up. Who's clashing weapons at this hour? He can't even get a moment to rest. A little later, a fight breaks out outside. A man is killed right in front of them, and Slave is shaken. Just like the king, he wonders if they can hold on until reinforcements arrive. Who would have thought they'd get ambushed just for stepping out to eat ice cream? Then he hears something, and turns at once. A mage appears behind him, and forms a huge fireball. It flies straight at him, and he takes the hit. Slave has no real choice except to swing his sword and try to stop the fireball. A massive explosion goes off, and the king shouts for him. The king rushes into the flames to help his injured friend, and Slave speaks up. He says he's fine, but the king sees that his arm is bleeding badly. Even so, Slave says this is an emergency, and asks forgiveness for his rudeness. The king understands and tells him not to worry about that. Slave realizes there's a mage among the attackers. Their clothes match so well he didn't notice before. He orders everyone to stay calm and reform their line, and the soldiers move in front of the king to shield him. The assassins don't plan to stop either. Their leader orders them to attack and leave no one alive. They answer eagerly, saying they'll take down that noble. Then they start arguing over the reward, each one claiming it for himself. Hearing that, Slave snaps and charges them, cutting one down with ease. The others immediately turn to strike from behind, but Slave spins around and blocks them all. A clash of strength begins as he locks blades with one of the masked men. He demands to know who sent them, but the man only says it doesn't matter. He's going to die anyway. Slave can tell that earlier spell already wiped out many of their men, and now it's obvious these bastards mean to kill every last one of them. If they lose here, it's over. For the sake of the kingdom, he has to protect his majesty no matter what. Then Slave notices the air starting to brighten. That mage is trying to cast another strong spell. So Slave warns everyone that magic is coming and orders the men to gather around the king. But the mage yells that it's too late and unleashes another fire blast, when suddenly two familiar fingers using frozen ki appear. A beam of ice shoots out, hits the mage, stops the attack, and freezes him solid. The attackers realize something just happened, and both Slave and the king are stunned. One assassin demands to know who the newcomer is. He shows up smiling, almost excited by the chaos. He asks if they finally noticed him. Apparently, he'd been watching from above for a while. Now that he's been spotted, he drops down and startles the assassins. He says it's been a while since he looked at the moon, and while talking, he casually takes out the man behind the assassin with the X mark. With all that noise outside, He figured he'd come check it out. The man with the X realizes he has no idea when this guy got there. With that creepy grin, the newcomer says he'll finish this before his ice cream melts. The assassin thinks he lost track of his movement for a moment, and someone who can slip behind him like that is clearly dangerous. He tries to warn the others, but now they're face to face with a monster. They tell themselves they were only caught off guard, and since they outnumber him, maybe they can still win. Their plan is simple: kill the king and get out fast before anything else changes. Seeing that boldness just makes him smile more. The X-marked assassin grabs a dagger, says he'll handle this, and orders the others to kill Tomalova as fast as they can. But when he attacks MC blocks with his freezing strike. Then he draws his sword and says he didn't expect to see so many kinds of blades here. His own weapon is absurd, a huge blade of ice, and he jokes that it's only fair to return the favor with the Northern Sea Ice Palace technique. He smiles at the assassin while the man with the X grows more and more desperate. Even so, he still rushes in, foolishly believing he can do something, and shouts that So won't leave here alive. The protagonist thinks that's exciting and raises his sword, ready to fight. He tells the assassin to show him everything he's got. The assassin strikes, but MC doesn't even move. He just holds his sword with one hand, without taking a single step. He realizes this won't be much trouble. While the assassin grows frantic and attacks from every angle, Seo calmly slips aside, avoiding every blow without getting touched. The assassin changes his grip, shifting the way he holds his swords, and prepares an X-shaped slash. He tries to kill him again, but still can't land a hit. He changes his grip again and lunges once more at Seal, but the protagonist loses patience and smashes him in the ribs. The man with the X drops hard, writhing in pain. MC lifts his sword again and strikes once more. The man blocks the first hit, but the second sends him flying back. He keeps attacking, then closes the gap and grabs the man's head with his palm, driving it into the ground and crushing him there. He lets out a cheerful laugh, then suddenly looks aside, searching for the other assassin. He turns his head, looking for where that other one went. At the same time, the king asks Slave what's going on. Slave tells him to be careful and move back. He's honestly scared of Sale. Then they notice something behind him, and the king says, "This is the kingdom's hope." Slave asks what he means. Meanwhile, the Death Mask men realize Captain Marijo has been defeated, and they start wondering if this man is some master swordsman. But Sale just speaks to all of them. He says if it weren't for them, if they hadn't done this, his ice cream wouldn't have melted in the rain. He's actually upset over his ice cream, and that's even though the ice cream was back at his house. The assassins are left wondering what this lunatic is talking about. Sale says he's about to show them how dangerous a grudge over melted ice cream can be. Then he says he'll count to 3. Anyone still here after that gets no promise of survival. The masked assassins think it's nonsense. They tell each other not to hesitate. Together they can beat him. In their stupidity they actually believe it and decide he's the one who should die. Sale starts counting. 1. They charge him again while he counts, and once they get close enough he says, 2. They're nearly within reach of him now, but then he says, 3. At once he uses his protective key to form a sphere around himself. Their attacks slam into the barrier, but they can't break through or get near him. Only then do they realize it's a barrier, but by that point it's already too late, because the freezing air around him spreads through the whole area. The cold spreads fast, freezing the whole forest. Sale warns them not to blame his sword for being cruel as icy. Ki pours into the blade and his anger rises. Then he cuts through the assassins. One after another, they die, pierced by sharp ice spikes until everyone around him is wiped out. Seeing that, Slave asks how this is even possible. The king is just as stunned by what he saw. Sale simply says his revenge has been served. Slave then tells the king to look because the protagonist is already leaving, casually excusing himself as he goes. He can't believe MC really just walked off, but the king quickly pulls Slave back to the matter at hand. There's no time to waste, he says. That person may already be making a move. Slave understands at once and places a hand on his chest. He bows and says, "His Majesty's wish is his command." Later, Royal learns that the children are studying magic. His assistant confirms it, and Royal says magic isn't something people can just teach themselves, so maybe the one teaching them is the magic swordsman. That has to be it. Most people in his family want to learn magic, so why is Sale teaching only those 4 children? Then he notices how excited Royal looks. It seems to make perfect sense, and he starts thinking Royal might just be tired from working too hard. After all, many people want to learn magic, but almost none ever get the chance, and those children were lucky enough to get it. Royal asks where they're training, and tells him to lead the way. He thinks the day they rise to the top may come sooner than he expected. Sometime later, they go to sail. He asks what kind of nonsense this is, and Royal wonders why he's acting like that when he already knows everything. He asks what he means, and Royal says he heard him has been teaching magic to the children. That's when the protagonist remembers the gossip from earlier and realizes this is what they were talking about. Royal sincerely thanks him from the bottom of his heart and asks how he can repay the favor. Sora's left a little shaken by that. Just then, Henry arrives and says there's a visitor for MC. He is confused by that. The man walks in and the protagonist feels like he's seen him before. The man begs not to be turned away, and asks MC to show mercy and help a servant. He explains that the king said if the magic swordsman couldn't be brought in today, he would come himself. He asks why he should trust him while the boy clings to his leg. Royal asks about this servant and about the king too, starting to suspect who this might be. The servant says it doesn't matter whether the protagonist pities him or not. He only asks that the protagonist not refuse His Majesty's invitation. Then MC asks him something. Why does he come here every single day without fail, only to go further than everyone else, just wasting his time? He tells him to stop and leave, but the boy stays behind crying. Sora thinks that even if this may or may not be a clue about Hwoyong, if this keeps up, he'll just keep losing time. So he takes out his necklace and looks at it. Then he stares at the stone again and remembers something. He recalls shouting at a man from Miram and says to him after 3 years they had fully taken control of Gangbuk and the Central Plains would arrive soon. So what kind of deal were they planning with that slippery bastard? The man answers that there's a time to show strength and a time not to. He believes now is the moment to prove the North Sea Ice Palace isn't just brute force. The protagonist thinks it over. The man adds that if words fail, they can always show their strength again. So the protagonist should take the lead. MC agrees and says he'll leave it to him. Still, he adds that if they refuse to cooperate they'll attack. The man gives an awkward smile and asks if that's really necessary. He then remembers that on the way to those negotiations he met Hwoyong. He ran into her and it was love at first sight. Right away he thought she was the woman meant for him. He fell for her instantly. They quickly became a loving couple and he still calls that the best day of his life. Remembering that, Sual smiles and decides he should just think about Hwoyong instead of getting upset over every little thing. Even so, he still feels he should do something. So he goes to the children, who can now release his icy key. The protagonist is pleased to see it. There's a lot to think about so he tells himself to move carefully. Later that afternoon, the king hears that Sual refused again. The servant offers a deep apology to His Highness and the king says the more he thinks about MC, the less he likes him. He wanted to thank the man for saving his life, but he is making that very hard. The servant says he'll go back tomorrow and surely the protagonist will come then. But the king says enough is enough and asks how many times he's already tried. He refuses to send the boy again. Right then, someone knocks on the door. It's Princess Isrold. The king tells the boy to do as he says and leave while he gets ready to receive her. When she enters, she sees the boy leaving in tears. The king asks Isrold to come closer. She tells her father the servant didn't look well at all. Did something happen? So the king explains the situation. That shocks her. She even asks him to repeat it, then quickly asks if he's okay and whether he was hurt in the assassination attempt. But he tells her that what matters is that he's fine now, so she shouldn't worry. She asks why the magic swordsman rejected the invitation, and the king says he has no idea. He wants MC by his side because he's skilled, but MC won't answer his summons. That makes her think he must be an incredible person if her father is speaking about him like this. The king says he's not just incredible and asks if she knows ice and ice cream became a huge hit in Royal. She says she does, since she bought some once. Then he reveals that the mage who saved him is the same one who made that ice, and she's stunned. The king confirms it and says hearing that only made him greedier to recruit him. She replies that anyone would feel the same, because when she ate it, her eyes went wide. She says she still can't forget how she felt the first time she tasted that ice cream, and now the person who made it is the same man her father is searching for. She gets even more excited and asks who he is. Later in her room, she watches some children below. They're eating ice cream and she wonders if she should use this chance to meet him in person. Meanwhile, Sol watches the children train and sees they've made great progress. He says it's only been half a month, and they can already release Ki. The Ki in this place is much denser than in the Central Plains, so that does make sense. Then he tells them all to stop. Now it seems they can control Ki, but maybe calling it mana works better. Since they can handle it properly, they'll move on to the next stage, and everyone gets excited. Then the king's servant comes to speak with the protagonist again, and the protagonist asks if he's stuck in some kind of flashback. He turns toward the boy and sees a hooded princess standing beside him. Since they didn't come that morning, MC thought they weren't coming back, so why is he here again? Then he suddenly jolts, because the necklace on his chest starts to glow. That shocks him, and he starts thinking this girl might be the one he's been searching for. She introduces herself politely, saying it's a pleasure to meet him, and that she is Ezel, princess of the Drak Kingdom. Sel can hardly believe it. At last he's found her. In that girl, he sees his former beloved, and realizes she's the one he's been looking for. So he brings the two of them inside, and the girl says she heard that he saved her father's life. Sel replies that it just happened not long ago. She questions that response, thinking he's being way too rude to her, and she starts getting annoyed, saying she heard her father invited him to the palace to thank him. Then she asks why he refused, and the protagonist thinks about it. She goes on saying it wasn't just once or twice. She heard he coldly rejected every invitation. As she gets angry, MC starts seeing his old Hwaiian and Princess Ezel. Even that irritated look feels exactly the same. He thinks that he's finally standing face to face with Hwaiian, and she asks why he's not saying anything while he zones out. That snaps him back. He says it's fine and asks when he should go, suddenly agreeing. She keeps complaining until she realizes he actually accepted, and that catches her off guard. Saul says she came all the way here to invite him, so he's accepting. She doesn't even know what to say. She admits that yes, she did come to invite him personally, and he asks when he can visit the palace. She says tomorrow around 11, and that should be a good time. In her head though, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had been ready for a real argument. Sal says he'll see her tomorrow, and she agrees before saying goodbye and heading out. As she leaves, the protagonist thinks that if he goes to the palace tomorrow, he'll see him, but he also remembers she's a princess, the king's daughter, and someone with the highest status in the country. How could he ever get close to her or even marry her? Then he remembers what happened with her previous father. That man didn't accept their relationship, and because of that, she ended up dying. So MC tells himself he has to plan everything carefully this time so nothing goes wrong again. He starts thinking it through. To pull this off, he'll need Royal's help. Royal is shocked when he hears him talk about marriage. The protagonist says he's serious. He plans to marry Princess Isolde. Royal starts shaking and asks if he's lost his mind. He stumbles over his words, getting worked up as he tries to respond. The protagonist stays calm and asks why Royal thinks it's such a bad idea. Royal explains that Princess Isolde is the only daughter of the late Queen Swan. That makes her the only true heir, and first in line for the throne. So from Yunok's view, this sounds crazy. A man with no title, no rank, unknown roots, and not even a knight wants to ask for the princess's hand. Royal says it's completely impossible to even be considered. He'd need to be a prince from another country or at least a high-ranking noble. And Royal adds, it would help if he were handsome too. But the protagonist starts thinking about that. If he can reach that level or earn enough fame, it would bring him much closer to marrying her. Royal agrees if he achieves something big enough, maybe there's a chance. Mudok gets fired up and says he'll try, but Royal tells him to hold on. First, does he even know the rules he has to follow in the palace? Mudok asks what rules he means. Royal can tell right away that he has no idea, so he grabs a few books. Then he hands over a whole stack on proper etiquette. Mudok is stunned. Royal though figures that if he lets him go unprepared and he causes trouble, his own business could suffer too. So he decides to teach Mudok everything. Mudok wonders why Royal suddenly seems so excited. Still, he knows he has no choice. If he doesn't want to embarrass himself, he has to study. So he agrees and asks Royal to take good care of him. That night, he's already exhausted from reading, but Royal keeps correcting his posture and making him continue. By then, the protagonist has huge dark circles under his eyes, and Mudok ends up listening to Royal lecture him all night. By the next day, he's dressed properly, looking sharp. He gets ready to go see the girl he loves and says it's time to leave. When Mudok arrives at the castle, he's announced before the king and brought inside in full formal dress. His whole manner changes as he bows and greets his majesty. The king is clearly pleased and tells him to come in quickly, but then Mudok notices something odd. Wasn't today supposed to be the day they met? He thought it would be private, so why are so many people here? So Spro quickly apologizes, saying she never meant to schedule the meeting on a day like this. Seeing how nervous she is, he figures she's telling the truth. She really does look sorry. But then Justin suddenly throws a fit in the middle of the room, demanding to know why that bastard is there. The protagonist remembers beating up those 3 boys and realizes Justin is one of them. He lets out a laugh. Then he stares straight at the boy, and Justin looks like he's about to lose it from fear. He starts cursing at Mudok, but his father immediately orders him to stop. Justin tries to talk back, only for Sergio to ask if he's trying to make a fool of him in front of his majesty. That finally shuts the boy up. He backs down and says he understands, While the protagonist thinks Justin definitely still remembers what happened, the king can tell the boy went through a lot, and Slave agrees with him. Then the king asks what suddenly made him accept the invitation, adding that he has no idea how disappointed he'd been all this time. Mudok says he had a reason. The king asks what it was. Mudok explains that, as His Majesty may know, Royal's merchant group is extremely busy right now because of a serious labor shortage, and out of everyone there, he's the busiest since he has to make the ice. He wanted to prepare enough ice before coming, but orders kept pouring in every day, and everything he made sold out right away. He kept putting the visit off, and that's why it took so long. Smiling, the king says he knew there had to be a reason. With ice and ice cream selling so fast, it makes sense that Mudok was busy. Mudok thanks him for understanding, then compares the king to Dan Shun Hak in his head and thinks this man is practically heavenly by comparison, already calling him father-in-law in his mind. The king says it's fine and asks his name. Mudok answers that he doesn't really have one, but His Majesty can call him the Magic Swordsman. The king asks if he's serious, saying he can't keep calling him that every single time. He starts thinking it over, saying this is a bit of a problem. Mudok thinks the easiest answer is to just give him a name, and then Ezreal suggests that they let the king name him personally. That catches him off guard, but then she says she has an even better idea. She asks the king to grant the Magic Swordsman a title. Sergio is surprised by that, and the king asks what she means. She says it was he who saved her father's life, so a reward like that would be fitting. Sergio agrees at once, saying she's absolutely right, and praising both the princess and His Majesty. After all, this young man saved none other than the king of their country. How could they not honor such a deed? He calls the princess's idea excellent, and she thanks him. The king agrees too. He says he can't just ignore the man who saved his life, so he stands and declares that he will grant him a title. Drawing his sword, he says that on the night Seal Mudok saved him, one word came to mind. He recalls being surrounded by assassins, their weapons closing in, and the freezing force that burst around him. Then he calls the protagonist forward. At that moment, he thinks about the title he's about to receive. Maybe he doesn't like kneeling, but if it helps him marry her, this is nothing. Suddenly, all that studying with Royal last night feels worth it. Damilova of the Kingdom of Drak then declares that to the brave man who saved his life and the life of his retainer without hesitation. He grants the title of Baronet, along with the name Blizzard. Blizzard. The protagonist remembers that blizzard means snowstorm in this world's language. The king says this gives him the right to pass that name down through future generations, for as long as the Kingdom of Drak endures. Then he allows him to rise and addresses him as Baronet Blizzard. The protagonist faces the king and says that if not for him, he wouldn't still be here, and once again expresses his gratitude. The protagonist thinks that if a day like that ever comes again, he'd gladly make the same choice one more time. Then Sergio tells His Majesty that since Blizzard saved his life, it would be proper to grant him land to match his title as well. The king points out that giving land to a baronet would be unprecedented, and there would surely be objections. But Sergio asks who would dare oppose the king's command. If anyone exists, he says, he'll personally remind them of the weight of the royal decree. The king starts wondering what Sergio is really after, and asks if everyone else shares that same opinion. Everyone at the table stiffens under the king's question, and under Sergio's deadly glare too. That look alone is enough to make them all quickly agree with the king. Tomilova says that if that is everyone's view, then fine. Still, there must be land suitable for Baronet Blizzard. Cedrigao says there's the frozen northern land he mentioned during the meeting a few days ago. At that, the king sees through his plan. Cedrigao says the timing is perfect. They needed someone to send there anyway, and everything just happened to line up. And when you think about it, the name Blizzard fits the Northern Territory perfectly. There's even a snowstorm there, so it sounds like a good sign. Now the king realizes this was Cedrigao's plan from the start. His real goal is to make the protagonist pay for hurting his son and his pride. That's why he'd been acting strange ever since he first suggested giving him a title. The princess then asks about the northern land, wondering if they mean the continent of Gillo. Are they really going to send him there, and make him its lord? The protagonist just watches quietly. He can tell Cedric he wants him gone because of what happened to his son. Still, if they're offering him land, he sees no reason to refuse, and a sly smile spreads across his face. He decides to use this chance to earn merit and raise his name even higher, closing the gap in status between himself and the girl he loves. When Seal Mudok gets home and tells Royal everything, Royal can't believe they gave him the northern lands. He says that place is hit by brutal snowstorms, avalanches, and cold so harsh it feels deadly. On top of that, The mana there is unstable. Then he asks if the protagonist is really going there, and he says yes. He tells Royal not to worry, he doesn't feel cold, and the unstable mana actually sounds interesting. Royal stares at him and asks if he's some kind of yeti. The protagonist asks what that is, and Royal explains that it's a legendary tribe said to live only in the northern lands, with stories passed down since ancient times. They look a lot like humans, but they're nearly 3 meters tall. People say the mana inside their huge bodies gives them monstrous strength. They don't feel cold at all, and they're known for being very violent. Seal thinks that sounds pretty interesting, but Royal says the Yeti may just be a myth, since almost no one has really seen them. What matters more is the North itself. People say the folks there can fight 100 men. They're rough, hate being ruled, and don't accept leaders. That only makes the protagonist even more interested, and Royal is stunned by how he sees things. MC says that if he wins over the people of the North, his name will rise even more. Royal, though, thinks that's way easier said than done. As he leaves, he notices them nearby. All 4 are crying about him leaving, so he asks what they're doing there. A little later, they beg him not to go. Seal tells them the North is too dangerous for kids who only just started learning martial arts. And then Sabina speaks up. She says they still have so much left to learn, and if he leaves, who's going to teach them magic? Royal quickly agrees with her. They all ask him to stay and lower their heads to him. The protagonist starts noticing those little troublemakers are really putting pressure on him. Then, the princess shows up behind him, and he's surprised Ezreal is there. She doesn't look well, so he asks if something is wrong. Ezreal says it would be better to talk after the children leave, so he tells them all to go, but they can tell something weird is going on and keep looking at each other. Then Sabina asks if that means he's going to accept what they asked for. She tells him to give them an answer soon. All of them stare at Semenlo with that same look they always use when they want something from him. Then they run off like he already agreed, and MC calls after them to let the adults talk. Ezreal says he has some very lively disciples. He answers that it's not energy overflowing from them, it's pure rebellion. That makes her laugh, and he asks if she feels a little better now. She says yes, then apologizes, because she asked her father to give Sale a title. He ended up being sent to the North. The protagonist thinks she really does resemble that other person, right down to this habit. She even apologizes to him, because of Danshjanak. She says she's carried guilt about it for a long time, and in her past life, everything felt like it was her fault. That similarity oddly makes MC happy, so he teases her, saying that if he hadn't been given a title, he wouldn't have to go to the North. Her regret only grows, and he finds that reaction kind of cute. Then he says an apology won't change anything. In the end, he still has to go. Ezreal asks what she can do to ease his mind. Even a little. Sol says a lucky charm might help. She asks what that is, and he goes right for it, saying that this kind of charm is basically a sincere kiss, given with real affection. The girl turns bright red just thinking about it. Startled, Sol says that judging by her reaction, maybe he shouldn't have said anything. Then he says he needs to go prepare for his trip, and tells her to forget what he just said. She's left stammering behind him. She gets flustered that he can say something like that, and just walk away, wondering what kind of person does that. But as she watches him, a faint memory from her past life flashes through her mind of what he used to be like. That shakes her, and she calls out, asking him to wait a moment. When she walks up to him, he asks what's wrong. She just looks at him. Ezreal wonders what that was just now, and whether this is wrong. But somehow his actions don't feel strange to her. Then she agrees, and says she'll do it. Sol thinks he was mostly joking and didn't expect her to answer like that. He tells her it's fine. He doesn't want to push anyone into doing something they don't want, so she should just pretend this never happened. But then she pulls him in, and plants a full kiss on him. No joke, she really went for it. After that, she turns completely red, hides under her hood, and asks if that settles it. Sol is left standing there, totally stunned. He can't believe that actually just happened. Still, as she walks away, he thinks he really has to succeed and come back. In the northern lands, word spreads that a new lord is coming. People say he's the man who saved the king, and that he was given a title and land as a reward. They've also heard he took down around 100 enemies at once, and some ask if that can possibly be true. One man says that's exactly what people are saying, that he's a 6th circle mage, and his sword skills are so strong, even a sword master couldn't beat him. Others call that nonsense and ask why someone that amazing would come all the way here. Another says the answer is obvious. He must have fallen out of favor with Duke Icarus. One of them is still clearly upset about it, but in the end, he says they're just rumors anyway. Then he stands up and says that if they scare this new lord a little, he'll probably run away like all the others. Meanwhile, deep in the mountains, Two people are in serious trouble, and the boy wonders where all these wyverns are coming from. The girl suddenly cries out when a huge blue monster lunges near them. She barely dodges in time. The boy calls out to Loia, asking if she's okay. He can't believe this. They were only trying to find some eggs. Loia is shocked that she was hit, but then she opens her eyes and sees the wyvern about to attack her companion. She warns Jake that it's right behind him. The boy is almost swallowed whole and thinks it's over, but then Seal appears like lightning, cuts straight through the middle of that wyvern, and takes its head off in a single slash. The beast drops dead beside them, and both of them are left in shock. Loia screams when the severed head lands right by her, and Seal tells her it's okay. His outfit here looks ridiculously good. Loia thanks him for saving them. The protagonist says it's no problem. He was only doing what he should as Lord. That leaves her confused. Then he says he'll see them around and walks off, leaving the two behind. Loia is shocked by how fast he moved. He's already gone. Jake asks what just happened because the wyvern egg is gone too. Sometime later, Seal is already inside a castle, and says this is definitely something. The place feels way too empty, and he wonders if no one knows his appointment ceremony is today. His vassal apologizes and says he'll send messengers to all the villages again, but MC says there's no need. Even if they do, he doubts anyone would come. So this is how Carolyn welcomes its new lord. With everyone acting like this, Soul understands why lord after lord keeps getting driven out. If that's how they want to play it, he can play too. A few days later, that blonde guy asks what happened and who did this to them. Was it the new lord? Everyone there is badly beaten, and they say yes. He grits his teeth annoyed he lost, but admits he has real skill. The bald man says he is fast, and whatever he did, the moment he touched him, he couldn't move an inch. He adds that Soul's hand technique was so brutal, the pain was beyond words, and the blonde man starts thinking it over, just as someone announces that Bastard is here. He's at the village square right now. The blonde man asks if he's already there, and says he's going to see for himself. He thinks this is finally the moment for Carillon's greatest hero to step in for them. They tell Max everyone is counting on him, and ask him to make sure he beats Soul. Meanwhile, the protagonist waits in the middle of the square, saying there are a lot of people there. Then that girl Loia comes up to him and asks if he's here. Soul is caught off guard by her. Then the blonde man arrives, calling out to Loia. She recognizes him as her father, and he asks what she's doing there. Loia says the crowd made her curious. He tells her that's because the Lord is here. Then she remembers MC had told her he was the Lord, and realizes that's what he meant back then. Her father asks what she's talking about, and she says, didn't she already tell him? When she tried to steal an ice wyvern egg and got into danger, someone saved her. Max is shocked to learn that person was the Lord. Now this is going to be a lot more complicated than he thought, and on top of that, it wasn't a normal wyvern. It was an ice wyvern taken down in one strike. Even Carillon's greatest hero would have trouble doing that. Max scratches his head, and admits a man like that deserves respect. Still, he thinks he can't back down now, so he introduces himself to Soul as Max, the greatest hero of this place. He almost gives a proper introduction too, but in the end, he just says his name is Blizzard, the newly appointed Baronet of Carillon. Max gets straight to the point, saying he's heard rumors about the protagonist. He asks if it's true that MC has been going around the villages and locking people up. MC says no, he was only teaching a lesson to those trying to rebel. Then he asks why Max wants to know, and whether he's planning to take their side too. Instead of picking a fight, Max says that's not what he wants. He has an offer for him. Mudok asks what kind of offer he means. Max explains that Carillon is a brutally cold place, and because of that, people there have always relied on strong liquor to endure the weather. Using that as his lead-in, Max brings up a drink. He asks if the Proto wants to have a drinking match with him. Mudok agrees right away. Max tells him to think carefully first. The alcohol is so strong it can feel like it burns your insides. But Mudok says he doesn't care. Then he sets the condition. If he wins, Max has to accept him as Lord and follow him without question. Everyone is stunned. Challenging Max to a drinking contest sounds insane, especially with Fina on the line. To them, Max is obviously going to win. Max gets fired up and tells Mudok better keep that promise. So they head straight to the bar, sit across from each other, and line up mug after mug. Before they start, Max gives him one last chance to back out, but Mudok asks why the lord of this land would go back on his own words, then says they should start now. The challenge begins. Max grins. He warns Mudok not to regret this later. Only a little while in, Max is already seeing the room spin, while the Proto just watches him with quiet curiosity. People call out to Max, asking if he's okay, because it looks like he blacked out for a second. He can't believe it. Him, the best drinker in Carillon, Loria tells her father to stop, but he insists he's not drunk yet. He refuses to lose like this, and demands another cup. Mudok tells him not to push himself too far. Max notices the proto is still drinking like nothing's wrong. Mudok even asks if Max can at least hit the cup properly, since he's spilling booze all over the floor. Shocked, Max asks how he's still fine, and the proto calmly asks back if he's ready to give up. Max says he's fine, then keeps drinking, red as a tomato. Everyone starts getting worried because unlike him, the proto is still completely relaxed. They can barely believe how easily Mudok is handling it. After downing another cup, he says maybe it's because it's been a while since he drank, but this stuff goes down surprisingly smooth. Then he glances to the side and says that no matter how anyone looks at it, Max is flat on the floor, dead drunk and unconscious. Mudok declares himself the winner. Nobody can believe Max actually lost, and then he says that everyone there is to gather at his castle exactly 5 days from now. He adds that they're about to prove whether they're the kind of people who keep their word, and the look he gives them makes it clear he means it. Sometime later, he sees that they all really came. He admits he didn't expect that, but they're better at keeping promises than he thought. Max asks if that isn't obvious, but before he can keep talking, the proto cuts him off and says he already knows, since they all know who he is. He says there's no need to waste time. From this moment on, they have 10 days to get ready to move. No one understands what he means, and the whole group just stands there confused. The proto asks if nobody has anything to say. Loya asks if he means they're all going to live in the castle. He tells her no and asks if she really thinks all of them could fit there. Then she reminds him that he told everyone to pack, but the proto asks who said anything about living there. She asks where they're supposed to go. Then Mudok answers clearly, they're migrating north. Everyone is stunned. Sale Mudok says he spent the last 5 days traveling around the area, and he found a place in the north big enough to hold at least 10,000 people. From now on, they won't live scattered apart anymore. They'll live together as one society. That only raises more questions. Max says the place isn't safe. It's home to ice ogres. The proto asks what those are. Max says they're basically ogres, and he finally gets it. He asks if Max means those bald things that walk on 2 legs. Max asks if he actually ran into them. Thinking it over, he says yes. Unfortunately for them, he killed them with ridiculous ease, and enjoyed every second of the fight. According to him, they're all gone now. That leaves everyone completely shocked. Sale Mudok says he was wondering what they were all so worried about, then tells them not to be afraid and to get ready to move, because he found them a great place. After dismissing everyone, they start to leave. He thinks the only thing left now is one simple task. Then Loya comes back to see him in the morning, and he's surprised she's there. She says she was too upset the other day to greet him properly, then introduces herself along with Jake. He says he gets why they came, because he was actually just about to call for them himself. Jake is surprised, but the proto tells him it's nothing serious, so there's no need to be nervous. He just asks them to follow him. The proto leads the 2 of them along. When they finally reach the place he wanted to show them, both of them are stunned. There are baby ice wyverns there, small enough to look like a bunch of cute little kittens. Loya immediately realizes he really was the one who took the eggs that day. She says they worked incredibly hard to get them, and asks how he could do that. The proto only asks one thing: who was it that saved her that day? That leaves them with nothing to say. Jake tries to speak, but the proto cuts him off, and says they can just take the little creatures. Loya asks if he means the wyverns, and he says yes. At first he thought about raising them himself, but they eat too much, make too much noise, and being around them is driving him crazy. Right on cue they show up again asking for more food, and for him to play with them too. But Loya and Jake explain that taking them now won't be so simple. Ice wyverns treat the first being they see after hatching as their mother, which means the proto has basically become their mom. He is clearly not happy imagining himself raising them. He asks if they're seriously saying he has to keep taking care of those noisy little pests, and Jake fires back that ice wyverns are incredibly valuable. So what kind of nonsense is he talking about? Loya adds that they grow into huge powerful monsters, then reminds the proto that he's lucky enough to raise such beautiful creatures. Jake says that if it were him he'd train them properly, and ride them all the way to Thaxton. The proto asks where that is, and Loya explains that Thaxton is about 1,000 kilometers west of Carolan. It's the kingdom of Gaia's second capital, and it has everything. The proto asks if those little things can really fly that far, and Jake says yes, they could make a round trip in around 2 hours. Hearing that, the proto starts thinking. Then he asks what the right way to tame them is, and Loya instantly realizes he's changed his mind. He admits it because he just came up with a brilliant idea. Sometime later, under Mudok's orders, the people of Carolan begin the Great Migration. They all push through the freezing cold behind the proto. During the march, Sabina runs up to him, calling out. She says she thinks the people are having a hard time, and he figures that makes sense. They've been walking for 3 days and 3 nights already. Mudok says some of them still don't trust him and are hesitating, but they'll reach their destination soon, and once they do, they'll change their minds. So he shouts for everyone to listen, telling them they're almost there. Even if it's hard, he asks them to trust him and hold on a little longer. Even so, some still doubt him. They don't even know where they're going, and they say there's no way to be sure the ice ogres are really gone. Then the protist slams his sword to the ground and asks if he didn't already tell them he killed every last one of those things. He asks how they can call themselves the brave warriors of Carolan, if they're this scared. That challenge settles them down. Sabina speaks to the Proto and he says that should be enough for them to understand. He tells her she'll get it once she sees the place herself. She doesn't really understand what he means, but as they keep moving forward, they come across a massive cave and realize this must be the place Mudok was talking about. He says it was hard to find, but he likes it a lot. He notices the others finally seem a little relieved, especially after they discover hot water inside the cave and wonder if a place like this could really exist. Then the Proto calls for everyone to listen. He tells them this used to be the hideout of the ice ogres, but from now on it will be their home. Since they'll be living here, he says it should have a name. Everyone agrees and urges him to choose one already. He says their old home was called the Ice Palace of the North Sea, so he wants something that feels connected to that. A name like that would remind him of his past. From now on this place will be called White Castle. Everyone likes the name and happily agrees. He thinks that now the only thing left is for the wyvern hatchlings to come back. Then he suddenly hears a huge noise. He asks what that sound was and sees crackling lightning bursting from some large object. One of the wyverns gets hit. Then a young mage asks for someone. There are strange weapons out there and they're taking down Soul's wyverns. Furious, the protagonist appears behind the boy and demands to know why a mage is here. The boy spins around and tries to strike him, but MC closes the distance so fast that the kid can't even tell what's happening. Then Mudok hits several points on his body and freezes him in place. After that he grabs him by the throat and slams him into the rock, nearly killing him on the spot. The boy starts losing his breath as Soul warns that he won't show mercy a second time. Even then, the kid glares back fiercely while Mudok asks who he is. While scaring him, he also demands to know why he attacked his wyverns. The boy can't move at all. His whole body is locked up. Izel tells him his mouth still works so he can answer. Terrified, the boy agrees. He says his name is Count Jeremy von Kerwin. The protagonist is shocked he's a count and asks if he's really a noble. Then he realizes Jeremy ranks even higher than he does. Jeremy is just as surprised and asks if MC is the one who saved his majesty and was granted land. MC asks if the boy knows him. He starts to calm down and asks if Jeremy means the former lord who was appointed there and later driven out. Jeremy says that's right. He adds that he had his reasons but Mudok cuts him off and says that doesn't matter to them. Still, Soul points out that Jeremy had been looking down on him from the start. Jeremy argues that now that they know who each other are, they should be on the same side. Mudok says nothing, and the boy nervously asks if he's wrong. He says yes, he is. Jeremy failed to do his duty, so he should have given up his title. As the protagonist presses harder on his head, the boy protests that this is unfair, but Mudok says this time he's getting special treatment, so he better never think about challenging them again. Then he strikes the boy in the chest one more time. Izel says he released the pressure on his acupoints so Jeremy can move again. The boy drops to all fours, shaking from the pain. Mudok warns that one stupid word will get him killed, and Jeremy quickly swears he won't say anything reckless. Now MC orders him to heal the wyverns and get moving. Jeremy hesitates and asks if he really has to heal them. Tizzle says he's good at reading people, and anyone bold enough to use magic in front of a lord has guts. At that, Jeremy falls silent. He mutters that something went wrong, while he simply walks off after giving the order. Sometime later, he forces the boy to write a letter. Jeremy asks what he's supposed to say. Mudok wonders why he's so shocked and asks if sending a letter to the king is really that hard. Jeremy says that's not it. Wasn't the protagonist the one who asked for a tax exemption letter? The protagonist says yes, because the people here are doing everything they can just to survive. But Jeremy warns that the other nobles will oppose it, and MC asks why. Jeremy explains that from their view, it would be unfair. If this gets approved, they won't be able to tell His Majesty they shouldn't have to pay taxes too, especially if their lands are also struggling. So even if the king likes him, he'll probably refuse. He starts thinking it over. Just as he expected, the real problem is the nobles who keep steering the king however they want, especially the one who sent him here. Sabao says he'll drop that idea, and Jeremy looks relieved. Then the protagonist asks, "What about another plan?" He leans in and whispers something to Jeremy. Hearing it, Jeremy asks if that's even possible, but Mudok only says one thing: "It's not impossible." Jeremy admits it might work, since it's basically the same kind of case. That makes Cell happy, and he says it's time to get ready. Later, with the rest of the residents gathered, Jake asks what suddenly got into their lord. MC shouts and asks if everyone is here. That gets everyone's attention. Loya says she came armed like he asked, but wants to know why they were called together. Cell says he'll explain now. From this point on, they're going to hunt ice wyverns, and their main targets are the eggs. He says it with clear excitement. Everyone is stunned that he wants ice wyvern eggs, though some point out that taking the eggs themselves isn't that hard. He says they'll split into groups of 30 for safety, and each team should focus on stealing at least one egg if they can. Then he announces the reward. The team that brings back the most eggs will get 100 gold coins. They're shocked. To them, that's more money than they ever imagined having. Jake asks if he really means all that for just a few eggs, and Max asks him to confirm it. So Fall says he never makes promises he can't keep. Then he asks the warriors of Caroline if they can do it. That fires everyone up. They tell him to leave it to them and rush off full of energy. Sewell then turns to Jeremy and says for the next 10 days he needs to follow each team and watch for anyone, especially capable. The protagonist plans to use them for something else later. Jeremy asks if he's thinking about forming a night order. Mudok stares at him, surprised he figured it out. Jeremy asks why he's looking at him like that. Did he say something wrong? MC thinks that even though the boy just joined them, he's already doing solid work and understands what he wants. Jeremy really is useful. MC says he's right. He's heard every lord should have at least one order, though it still won't be easy. Jeremy says the Lion Knights of the Ikras Duchy are especially powerful, strong enough that they might not even lose to the Royal Guard. He says he gets it but tells Jeremy not to worry. Sooner or later they'll become the best. This time he'll build one greater and stronger than the Snowfrost unit. He won't lose someone precious to him twice. Then he calls out to everyone and says now is the time. Start moving toward the target. But messing with that thing was bound to go wrong. A huge explosion erupts and a grown wyvern attacks them. Daesh says now it's his turn and he charges in with his group to steal those eggs. The layperson tells Jake to cut off its tail and he rushes in and slices it off with ease. Then Max charges at the wyvern's face and lands a massive punch. After that, Sale orders the second unit to throw the net, and when they pull it off, they finally trap the monster and pin it down so it can't move. The protagonist thinks it all worked out and Jeremy says they've been hunting for days now. At this point, their teamwork is perfect. Jeremy admits he never would have thought of stealing a wyvern egg so they could tame it as soon as it hatches. If this works, they'll be able to carry and sell hunting goods like leather and bones to distant cities using the ice wyverns. He realizes that would make an amazing transport system. Sale tells everyone to keep up the energy. If they bring back lots of wyvern eggs from this hunt, they'll all get a big reward. That makes them even more excited. They keep going with insane efficiency. Jeremy says turning the wild warriors of Caroline into a united force should have been impossible, and no matter how many times he sees it, it's amazing. Then one of them takes down a wyvern with ease. Everyone is stunned and says that really is worthy of Gale. Saul says that wasn't bad at all and asks who the guy is that cut down an ice wyvern with a dagger. They tell him it's Schwartz Gale. Since he even has a nickname, MC figures he must be famous. They say he is a hero to commoners who breaks into corrupt nobles' homes and gives the stolen goods to the poor. Basically, he's Robin Hood. Saul asks if they're serious and wonders why he's here. They explain that he was caught in a trap and imprisoned, but somehow escaped and ended up here. He isn't sure that happened by chance. Looking at Schwartz, he thinks the guy seems decent, and since he's already getting along with the locals, that could be useful. So he tells Jeremy that if there are any other escaped prisoners besides that man, he wants a full report. Jeremy realizes his workload just grew again. After the hunt, the protagonist addresses everyone and says that thanks to their hard work, they collected enough eggs. He promises to pay the reward just like he said he would. But then Max speaks up to Saul, who asks what the problem is. Max says they followed orders and gathered the eggs, but asks if he can finally explain why. MC says everyone must be wondering, so he'll tell them. As they know, an ice wyvern sees the first thing it notices after hatching as its parent, and he plans to use that to tame them. His goal is to use ice wyverns for transport, and those trained wyverns will carry his special goods to every country. They ask what that special product is. Saul says he has a few ideas, but the first is leather. Still, the main product he has in mind is the Ice Ogre tribe. Everyone is shocked and asks if he plans to kill them all, while the ogres insist they still want to live. He tells them all to be quiet, and everyone stops at once. He asks who killed the ice ogre that had been roaming near the castle, and they admit it was him. He nods, then asks if they really think he'd let them end up as ogre food. A few of them admit things are different now, and say that if they stand with their lord, this might actually work. Then the protagonist asks what they think. Does that finally give them some courage? That makes everyone laugh. He says they're doing it, and that the plan is perfect. But then Leo comes running in, shouting for him. He asks what happened, and Leo apologizes, saying something urgent came up. It's about Savina. Leo says she's dying, and the protagonist can't believe it. He demands to know what the boy is talking about. The two who are still standing tell Savina to keep using her mana. Lying on the ground, she thanks the two who collapsed helping her. Luffy tells her to hang on, the master is on his way. Mudok arrives and asks what's going on. He checks on the girl and realizes this is serious. Her condition is much worse than he expected. He asks how this happened, and tells them to explain. They say it started while she was helping Osborne find a place to build the wyvern egg nest. That's when they found a huge flower field filled with icy blossoms they had only seen in books. He figures she wanted to show him the flowers, so she picked one. They told her to come back, but then she started feeling sick right away. A moment later, she dropped to the ground. They say she passed out as soon as they got back to the village, and beg him to do something. If she doesn't wake up, he'll be heartbroken. The protagonist takes the icy flower from her hand and realizes this is bad. Then he recognizes what it is. It's an icy snow flower, the same glacial flower they were talking about, but that makes no sense to him. This elixir should exist only in the Northern Sea Palace in the Central Plains, so how is it in this world? Still, everyone keeps begging him to save her, and he says that comes first. He'll deal with the flowers later. They ask him to take Savina with him, and he says they're heading to the training grounds right now, so they rush back to the castle with the girl in their arms. The protagonist tells them to lay Savina down there. He warns them to be careful not to hurt her. She's clearly in a lot of pain as they set her down. He says he's going to treat her now, and orders everyone to leave. No one is allowed into that room until he says so. Then Loaf begs him to save his sister, and he promises he will. He thinks about the icy snow flower they call a glacial flower. In this world, it's known as a strange flower that gives off freezing air non-stop. But in the Northern Sea Palace, where Sail Mudok lived, its pulp was a priceless elixir. Getting that pulp is hard because of the extreme cold, and when he takes it out, the freezing energy pouring from it is insane. Still, for someone like him who mastered Ice Quad, it's different. Savina fainted because her own Ice Quad wasn't strong enough to handle the cold. Then he places the pulp in the girl's mouth. Next, he starts controlling her frozen quad with a hand on her head. As he works, he calls to Savina and tells her to open her eyes, and she really does come back. He tells her that once she gets up, she needs to sit down and circulate her quad, and she agrees. Right away, she starts doing exactly what he told her. And when she does, her quad begins to flow in a truly amazing way. He says that's good. The ice quad in her body is fully stabilized through the flow of her inner energy. Then the girl goes through an awakening. She wakes up again. He tells her to be careful, then jokes that if she's going to fall asleep, she should at least close her eyes first. When she collapses, he notices her inner energy has grown a lot. It worked even better than he expected. If this keeps up, he thinks he can push her training even harder. And before that, once she wakes up, they need to go to the field where they found the icy snow flower. He may reach his goal sooner than planned. Sometime later, the girl wakes up after sleeping for quite a while, not understanding what happened. After collecting the ice wyvern eggs, the castle went through a major reorganization. First, Mudok checked the list. Jeremy prepared and formed his own knight order, the Glacial Storm Knights. He says he'll keep it short and promote all of them to knights. With them, he'll create the Glacial Storm Knights and announces that they'll ride wyverns. Then he says Schwartz showed the best example in front of everyone, so he was chosen as captain. After that, the school and hospital were moved to new places. Restaurants, bars, clothing shops, and many other businesses were also built following Mudok's plan. The training facilities were adjusted to fit each person's skills, too. He says the school also needs to improve, and Jeremy agrees. Osborne is assigned to the White Castle Security Force, and Jeremy is named his assistant. The protagonist says Osborne Murray is better at security than assistant work, so Jeremy will take that role instead. But Jeremy points out that he also has to teach magic to the people. The protagonist asks if he doesn't want the job, and Jeremy honestly says that's exactly the problem. So he has no choice but to say he'll do his best. Then he says he deserves 1,000,000 gold coins because he doesn't want to die. The protagonist replies that for now, he's only getting 2. He explains that the patrol unit won't just guard the area around the castle, they'll also explore Clairwan and gather the people scattered around. He says he'll be the captain of the patrol unit, while the other group will be the Wyvern Knights. Jake gets totally fired up, though the protagonist thinks he's taking this very seriously, since there still aren't any wyverns big enough to carry adults. Once the number of Wyvern Knights is decided, the remaining ones will go to Clairon's merchants. Then he tells Loya that in secret, he'll be the one in charge while she acts as his representative. She agrees, and he wraps up by wishing her good luck. Later on, Jeremy is completely worn out. He complains that he's late, even though he was told his workload would be reduced, and wonders how much trouble today is going to bring this time. When he enters the room, he apologizes to Max for being late, but Max says the meeting just started. Then Jeremy looks ahead and notices Savina there. He asks if that isn't the girl who was in bad shape recently, and wonders why she's here. The protagonist says that since he's here, he should sit down, then tells Osborne to continue. Osborne says the security unit hasn't even been around that long, but they already have more than 20 people locked up, and over half of them are fugitives from outside. Max gets angry and says they're criminals, so they should stay in prison before they cause more trouble. The others agree. The protagonist asks if they should start with him, since Max was the main one behind the rebellion that drove out the old leader and Jeremy for no good reason. Max argues that was different. It was self-defense to protect Clairon's freedom from the nobles, but the protagonist asks if Max's actions count as a noble struggle, while Captain Schwartz's are just cheap theft. Max has no answer and awkwardly apologizes to Schwartz. Schwartz says he just hopes Max won't forget what really causes the people suffering. Then he adds that they're in a meeting now so they can talk about it later. The protagonist wonders how Max can be so narrow-minded, then asks if anyone else has an opinion. Savina asks if she can share hers. He tells her to go ahead. She says that if Max feels that way, then public opinion about the fugitives must already be pretty bad. And since the ogre hunt starts tomorrow, that could affect things. The protagonist asks what that has to do with the issue. She suggests putting the prisoners on the front line of the hunt. Everyone is shocked, but the protagonist likes what she's saying. He says it's a very interesting idea and tells Savina to continue. A little later, an ice ogre appears and lets out a roar. One of the prisoners tells Schwartz he thinks they lost it. The fugitives with Schwartz are Gregory and Lennon, and Schwartz says it looks like he's right. He tells them that once they get far enough away, they should hide their tracks and attack. Everyone agrees. As the ogre charges in, Lennon and Gregory move after it. They leap onto the monster and strike, making the ogre roar and turn around. Schwartz warns them to be careful and tells Lennon to go in and counterattack. The ogre swings its club, and Lennon tries to block it. He realizes it's too late to dodge, but then Schwartz appears and yells for Lennon to duck. He blasts past him and slashes the ogre with both daggers, tearing through it at insane speed. The ogre starts bleeding, and all three rush it together in a direct assault that finishes the monster off. A little earlier, Savina had suggested putting the prisoners on the front line of the hunt, and the protagonist liked the idea. Osborne asks if she means using the hunt to get rid of them, saying that sounds extreme, but she argues that if the protagonist goes with them, it's far more humane than just locking them up, especially since the master wouldn't waste manpower so easily. She adds that once they fight together, things should get better, and they'll start understanding each other more. They say it was a close call, but somehow everyone's still calm. To them, Lennon is just bluffing again. That makes everyone laugh, since it's obvious he was scared out of his mind. Lennon admits it was rough. He says it felt like that time he threw a pickaxe at the prison guards and got slammed for it. After that, they keep chatting and start getting along like real friends. She thinks this is exactly how people will start seeing them in a different way. Cedric Moodoak notices how well they've started working together during the hunt. Seeing that, she thinks her disciple really went further than expected. But right then, a Yeti shows up. It watches them from far away. Sometime later, the other teams keep working. They tell everyone not to rush and to fall back toward the ambush point. In the middle of the snow, the masked boy says he'll fire a few arrows and tells them to get ready. He shoots, but only hits a tree, which makes him a little nervous. The others say it was probably just the sound of the leaves. They tell him that's likely all it was, then order them to collect the arrows and search another area. Then that huge Yeti appears near them, and they panic, asking what that thing is. At the same time, Cedric Moodoak notices the villagers don't seem afraid of the ice ogres anymore. Osborne says that makes sense. They're all excited to hunt now. Jeremy adds that it's all thanks to their lord's leadership. They ask if this was part of the plan too, and he tells Jeremy to make sure no one moves ahead without orders. Then they spot an older man approaching. Osborne asks if they're still checking the status of the monsters besides the ogres and wyverns, and Jeremy says yes, they still need to sort out more information. Osborne then asks the man what happened and whether the others are safe. He says they're not dead, but they were badly hurt and are being treated at the hospital. The protagonist asks what happened. Osborne says it sounds serious, and he asks for details. The man says a different kind of monster showed up, something other than an ice ogre. He explains that 2 of the members sent to investigate were attacked by that monster. The protagonist asks if he's sure it wasn't an ogre, and the man says yes, it was a different species. When told to describe it, he says the creature was covered in white fur and unbelievably huge. It looked about 3 meters tall. The protagonist thinks it over, then notes that ogres are usually dumb, but this monster sounds smarter. Then he senses its presence. He tells Jeremy the hunt is over. When they ask if he plans to go alone, he says he'll handle it himself. He tells them to move in only after the area is safe. They agree and let him go ahead. As the protagonist walks, he says that if the report is true, then he knows this monster. He remembers hearing about it from Royal before. He recalls Royal asking if it might be a Yeti. Then he uses the eye of the mind with his Kia to see farther ahead. Soon he finds that fleeing Yeti running nearby and heads straight for it. He stops near the monster, draws his sword, and gets ready to strike, but the Yeti shows no desire to fight. The protagonist attacks anyway, making the monster's arms start to bleed. He says the hit barely did anything, and that giant body must be incredibly tough. Still, now that he's seen it in person, he's sure of it. That creature really is a Yeti, and now the protagonist stands face to face with it. He thinks about how this Yeti had been roaring and acting fierce until now, but in front of him it's frozen stiff like a terrified animal, bristling in a shaky attack stance. He says the reaction is like it can feel the pressure of his power. Its eyes say everything. The protagonist says that wild stare tells him the whole story, and the Yeti starts lowering its ears. He says he was curious enough to think about sparing it, but he can't let a creature that hurt the villagers stay free. Then he tells the Yeti to pray it's born human in its next life. He charges straight at the monster, which is too scared to even think about defending itself. Then he sends a blast of ice through his sword, but the Yeti raises a hand and blocks it by creating some kind of barrier that shocks Silmadok. After the attack flashed, the Yeti simply vanished. He says it disappeared before the blow even landed, and wonders what kind of magic that was. Still, he keeps that green light in mind. He's startled because when he first came to this world, he heard from Luffy that mages of the 5th circle or higher can use a space travel spell called teleportation. Most mages only reach the 1st or 2nd circle. Thinking it through, a 5th circle mage would already be around the transformation realm or even the profound realm by executive standards, and yet a fur-covered human-like monster just used that same rare magic. He says that even if it is spatial magic, that doesn't mean he can't catch it. He senses where the Yeti is, and fires a massive beam of ice toward the monster. That helps him find it, and he says a beast that huge running away like a rat is ridiculous. Even so, he can still feel its presence nearby. It seems the teleport didn't take it very far, maybe around 1.5 kilometers, so he's sure it's still close. Then he suddenly looks back in alarm after noticing something there, and stepping on a piece of wood. That's when he realizes there's a cave. He goes inside and is shocked to find a library there, a library in the middle of a snowy field. It throws him off completely. Then he looks down and sees the Yeti curled up there. He says that if it's going to hide, it should at least do it properly. He speaks to the Yeti, and the creature begs him not to come closer. He tells it to calm down. He's not going to eat it. Then he asks the creature if it's human. It says no, it's a great warrior of rares, Condor. He questions that, and then Jerome appears behind him and explains that it's just another word for Yeti. The protagonist says Jerome did well finding this place, and Jerome thanks him. He explains there were signs of destruction nearby, and something like this couldn't have been caused by anyone else. Looking around, it almost feels like a natural disaster hit the place. Even so, he wonders why a legendary race like the Yeti only mentioned in ancient times is here in this library. The protagonist says that's exactly what he wanted to ask, too. He asks if the name was Condor, then demands to know where the monster came from. Condor stays silent, so the protagonist asks if it's trying to run again. He tells it to speak now because he's not patient, while summoning his icy Kia. That terrifies the Yeti even more. It finally starts talking and says it's from Galak. He asks if that's the name of its village, and the Yeti confirms it is. He says there must be a lot of Yetis there, and the creature confirms that, too. Meanwhile, Jerome keeps looking around the library. The protagonist decides to put that aside for now and asks why it attacked his men. He warns that the answer could cost it its life, but the Yeti says it never meant to kill anyone. It repeats that it's the great warrior of Rothfurs and insists people don't die from a single hit of its staff. He asks if that's true. Kundal. The Yeti corrects him, saying the name really is Kundal. The protagonist admits the Yeti seems to be telling the truth. From what he can tell, most of the victims only suffered bruises. No one died, and he remembers the man saying they weren't dead, just badly hurt and being treated at the hospital. He's relieved nobody mentioned any deaths, though he says the way the report sounded made it seem like someone had died. Kundal then explains that he only drove them away because the humans entered the sanctuary first. They attacked first, and he never strikes first. He insists he never has. The protagonist asks if that means the hunters entered Yeti territory by accident, and Jerome says that seems likely. The protagonist then thinks Royal gave him bad information about Yetis. He tells Jerome to treat Kungru's wounds. The Yeti tries correcting the name again, but by then it's pointless. As they talk, Kundal asks what the problem is. The protagonist gets straight to the point and tells the beast to show him where its sanctuary is. He says he'll warn his people so they don't trespass again. Kundal asks if he really means it, suddenly getting excited. The protagonist says yes, but then adds there's one more thing. He asks why Kundal is speaking so casually, and whether he even knows honorifics. Kundal asks what honorifics are. The protagonist realizes he truly has no idea, tells him to forget it, and wonders what use there is in someone who can't even speak properly. Jerome finishes treating him. The protagonist calls for them to head back, but Jerome stops him and says he has a request. Meanwhile, back in the protagonist's new territory, Roll talks to Henry, and asks how many days have passed since the promised date. Henry says it's been about 3 months. Roll starts to realize the truth and drops to the ground. Shaking with fear, he tells Henry that the Merchant Association is completely ruined. His golden goose really did fly away and leave him behind. Henry is stunned to hear that Roll's Merchant Association has collapsed. Then Edmund says Lord Palistrom the mage made a promise, telling him to hold on for just 3 months, because he guaranteed he would send someone. My God, what is this panel? This scene is wild. He goes on saying they still haven't received any message, and Henry starts wondering if he was really sure that was the exact. Edmund asks him to calm down. Sale is sure that kind of man wouldn't break a promise. Then a huge shadow falls over them, and they look up. It's an ice wyvern, and they panic. The beast lands right in the middle of the city in front of them, scaring both of them half to death. From its back, Sabina calls out and recognizes Edmund. That catches him off guard. He didn't expect it to be her. Sabina says the ice delivery has arrived. Edmund lights up when he hears it, really is the ice, and says he knew the magic lord would keep his word. Henry, though, is stuck on the fact that she came riding that thing. He points out that a creature like that is worth a whole squadron, and they're using it to deliver ice. Now he's wondering what that crazy man in the north is doing. Then Sabina remembers something. She says her master told her to hand this over to someone, and he asks who she means. Then he remembers exactly who that person is. At the same time, Precisa Shield is having tea with another man. He thanks her for accepting his invitation. Then he tells her she gets prettier every day, but she barely reacts. All she says is that Justin is flattering her. He notices she's as cold as ever. She doesn't even give him a fake smile, but that only makes him more interested. If she were easy, this wouldn't be fun for him. So he decides to be patient and make that cold attitude disappear someday. Just then, a maid comes in and tells Precisa something. The moment she hears it's a letter from Baron Blizzard, she's clearly shaken. Justin hates that reaction. The maid says the letter was taken to her office, and Precisa quickly tells her to go. Justin tries to stop her. He asks if she's already leaving, and says he came all the way there this morning just to see her, but she reminds him that he trained so hard he can't afford to miss even one day. Instead of wasting time here, he should head back. Then she simply calls for the carriage, leaving Justin there, watching her go. He can barely hold back his anger and slams his hand down. Of course, he's thinking about Blizzard, not that he'd dare do much if Sis were actually there, so he just curses him from a safe distance. Meanwhile, she heads to her office to read the letter. In it, the protagonist calls her his dear Princess Shield. He asks how she's been, and says he's been doing well, thanks to his lucky charm, that sudden kiss she gave him. He writes that the north is a great place to live, with shining crystal caves, warm hot springs, and a city they built inside the cave called White Castle. It's a beautiful place, he says, but it has one big flaw. Princess Shield isn't there, and because of that, it feels empty. He adds that he sent a small gift along with how much he misses her. Said Rule really is an old-school romantic. Then she notices there's something else beside the letter. As MC says he'll send another letter soon, she looks at the ice flower. He signs it as the one who misses her dearly, Baron Blizzard. That leaves her deeply shaken. She wonders why this keeps happening, why she can't stop thinking about him. Her eyes stay on the flower, then she stands and says she needs to make sure. She has to meet him. Elsewhere, Sol is using magic to make another one of those flowers, but it breaks in his hands again. He thinks he's good at wrecking things, but delicate work like this is hard for him. Then someone starts calling for him. He asks Jerome what happened, and why he's making such a fuss. Jerome says Seal needs to come to the office right away. They've made a huge discovery, something that only happens once in a lifetime. He agrees it sounds important, though he wishes Jerome worked this hard all the time. Jerome just tells him to hurry. When he gets there, he's surprised to learn they found an ancient mage's library. The protagonist just goes so, and Jerome asks if that reaction isn't way too dull for such a huge find. He calls it a relic of ancient humanity, a key to reviving lost magic, and maybe even a path beyond the fifth circle. As MC listens, he suddenly feels something strong. He tells Jerome the feeling is coming from his waist. Jerome quickly lowers his hand to hide it and says it's nothing important. He didn't mention it because he thought it was worthless, but he pulls it into his hand with key and opens it, while Jerome nearly cries. He says hiding something like that only makes him want to see it more. But when he opens it, even he is surprised. Inside are just a few small stones, though he notices they're glowing. Jerome says he wasn't trying to hide them. They're stones filled with mana, so he calls them mana stones. Sal finds that suspicious and asks what he planned to use them for. If he was hiding them like that, Jerome admits that he's currently a fourth circle mage, but he's stuck at a wall he can't get past. He thought the mana stones might help him break through. The protagonist says he gets it. Breaking through a barrier like that isn't easy, so he understands. Jerome thanks him and asks if that means he can keep the stones, but MC says that gives him even more reason to say no. Jerome gets mad at the refusal. He argues that if he gets stronger, it will help Caroline, so Sol should let him keep them. Still, he refuses again. He says the stones might help Jerome break that wall, but what happens after that? Will he keep looking for more mana stones? He warns him not to depend on outside help to reach a new level. Real growth comes from time and effort, building up over time. There are no shortcuts to true understanding. Jerome is frustrated, but he understands. He realizes Sol is right. He reached the fourth circle through his own hard work. The protagonist tells him magic can't be mastered in a rush. His own master used to say that even if you're slow, if you keep trying, you'll reach enlightenment eventually. That, he says, is what magic really is. Jerome admits that somewhere along the way, he forgot his master's lesson. MC jokes that he thought he'd have to beat that lesson into him, but luckily, Jerome understood on his own. Then Sol asks what else the stones can do. Jerome says they can be used in almost any kind of magic, mana boosting, barriers, communication spells and more. That last one catches his attention. He asks if a person could use one to communicate even without being a mage. Jerome says yes. If he puts a communication spell into the stone, even a normal person could use it. And since this is a high-grade mana stone, it could work over a huge distance, even across the ocean to the Jeva Empire. The protagonist then asks what Jerome thinks matters most when ruling a nation, but Jerome isn't sure. MC says it's speed of information. The one who gathers the most information and sends it the fastest wins. So he orders Jerome to turn every mana stone there into communication stones right away, and Jerome agrees. Sometime later, Sol and the others test the communication stone. Jake speaks through it and asks if they can hear him. Everyone is shocked and he says the sound is clear. He asks where his subordinate is right now, and Jake says his current location is with a merchant caravan on the plains, about 10 kilometers from White Castle. Sol says he can hear him perfectly and tells him no more updates are needed. Then Jerome checks in too, and the protagonist says he hears him clearly with no interference. The test is a success. He announces that from now on they'll use these stones to communicate, and everyone starts freaking out over how amazing that is. Jake is happily yelling through the stone when an urgent order comes in, telling Squad 3 to pull back. Then he hears Osborne ordering Jake's training intensity increased when he returns. Jerome agrees but warns that if they keep this up, the stone will break. Before long, someone arrives and she calls out for her master. Jake is happy to see she's back and welcomes her. Then they move to a table to talk with all the leaders. Fabiana asks if there's any problem with Edmund's letter. Sol says no. He explains that he told Edmund to write down the political situation in the nearby countries, and Edmund did it in great detail. But one name in it, Anos, for some reason makes him uneasy, so he asks if anyone there knows anything about Anos. One of them speaks up. He says he hasn't confirmed it himself, so it may just be rumor, but people say Anos is a grandmaster swordsman. That shocks everyone except Sol, who doesn't fully get the reaction. The others explain that if he's really a grandmaster swordsman, then he's likely above a swordmaster, and as far as they know, no one on this continent has ever gone beyond that level. Anssi tells everyone to be quiet, and the room instantly falls silent. No one says another word. Sol starts thinking. He believes a grandmaster is probably equal to the transformation realm from the Central Plains. At that stage, a person can forge a sword through willpower alone. When he first came here, and heard that only around a dozen people had reached swordmaster level, he was disappointed. For a martial artist, living in a world with no worthy rivals is painfully boring, but now someone at the transformation realm has appeared. Even if he can't fight him yet, he still wants to meet him. The strongest people in this world are finally showing up, and that battle-crazy psycho is loving it. One of them adds that this may not matter, but he heard something odd about the man. The Prota asks what it is, and he says that whenever that man draws his sword, the air fills with the scent of plum blossoms. That makes him stop and think. He remembers a sword art that carried the fragrance of plum blossoms. Then Mount Hoa comes to mind, the one place that could create an aura like that. Still, he tells himself that can't be possible, but then he wonders if someone else came here from the Central Plains. If that man really did, maybe he isn't the only one in this world. That thought takes him back to the sect tied to those plum blossoms, to a time when he was trying to unite the Central Plains. He remembers Mount Hoa and a sword that carried the scent of plum blossoms. Back then he said that master had amazing sword skills, but he picked the wrong opponent, and after winning, he froze the man solid. Then he spoke to the Jampung sect leader, who cursed at Sibyl Madak, calling him a little bastard, and saying things would have gone differently if his disciple had been there. But when asked if he meant the guy who ran off a few days ago, he snapped back that his disciple didn't run. He vanished during closed-door training, as if he had gone to another world. The Prota thinks about that now, because back then he assumed it was just a cheap excuse. But what if he was telling the truth? Seeing a strange reaction, Jerome asks if something is wrong with the letter. He brushes it off and says it's nothing serious. Then she mentions that the kingdom sent an inspection group, and everyone is even more shocked. They all start asking about this inspection group. What the hell happened? The Prota asks if it's really worth this much panic, and they insist that it is. An inspection group only comes for two reasons: a royal tour, or to hunt down and execute traitors. He says they need to be ready for anything, then asks when the group is supposed to arrive. Maybe in a month. Instead, he makes a few hand signs. Jerome turns around, thinking something is there. He says they'll arrive today at the 8th earthly branch in local terms, around 2 in the afternoon. So that means they're already almost at the door. The Prota says they must be right outside by now anyway. Then they realize it's true. The group has already arrived. A man shouts from outside. It's Jules himself. He calls for the Lord of White Castle, Baron Blizzard, and orders him to come down at once, and greet the inspection group with proper respect. The Prota decides to have some fun, saying it's been a long time since he last saw Justin. He even asks if his arm is doing better. That makes the boy panic, and his arm still hurts from when the Prota completely wrecked it. Everyone wonders when he got down there so fast, and they also realize that really is Justin. Jerome starts wondering what the hell the Lord is thinking. Is he actually planning to start a rebellion? Even standing face to face with Justin, he just smiles. Then he tells whoever is hiding to stop and addresses Her Highness, Princess Israel, directly. She simply asks Justin to stop acting so hostile. Then she asks how the Prota has been, in a sweet tone. She's also surprised by what he prepared for her. He says this is the crystal cave he mentioned in the letter, and she calls it beautiful. She says she wants to see the hot springs too, and he tells her to follow him. So in the end, it was only a royal visit. After reading his letter, Israel said she begged her father, and came all the way here with the inspection group. He tells her she's still as stubborn as ever. Then he says that Lucky Charm gave him a lot of courage too, and she immediately declares that topic off limits. She tells him not to talk about it, and he thinks that even in little things like this, she's exactly like she was in his past life. He thinks about how long the journey has been. To avenge Horion, he conquered Morim, and after wandering in circles, he finally found her here. Her face is different now, but meeting her again is enough. When he brings her to the hot spring, she's stunned and calls it beautiful. While she's still taking it all in, the Prota reaches toward her hair. He holds her and says that to him she's even more beautiful. The Baron's sudden move leaves her shocked. He tells her he truly missed her. Then he calls her Horion. She freezes and asks about that name. He's startled too, realizing what he just said. She asks who that is, and he apologizes, saying he got confused. But then she tells the Baron that she liked the way he looked at her, with those eyes that never turned away. She felt warmth in them, but now she thinks she knows the truth. She asks if that affection was really for her or for the woman named Horion. The Prota has no answer. She turns to leave, but when he tries to say something, the girl covers his mouth and tells him it's fine. He doesn't need to say anything. Then she simply walks away because for her, that already answered everything. He's left standing there, looking miserable. He admits he didn't even know what he was saying. On the way back, he thinks about Horian, and about Israel too. Even if he explained reincarnation, there was no way she could understand all the time and feelings piled up inside him. But as he heads home, an assassin is waiting. The killer draws a weapon and strikes at the Prota from behind. But when the attack ends, blood is all that sprays through the air. A little earlier, Justin had spoken with Erevan. He closes in on a shadow, and it asks what he wants. Justin asks what happened to that man. The shadow says the ambush worked, and Justin grins like a lunatic. At the attack site, there's only a mana stone left behind, with blood staining the snow. Then inside the guest room at White Castle, the princess is alone. She thinks she's pathetic. She's crying like a baby after getting rejected. The sadness still won't leave. She keeps thinking about the way the Prota looked at her, and she thinks he stood there like an idiot, because he could have stopped her. Just then, someone approaches her room from outside. A voice tells her she has a visitor. She lights up and asks if it's the Baron. But when she opens the door, she starts acting flustered, asking what brings him here so late and whether he came to apologize. But the person on the other side is someone else entirely, holding a blood-covered sword. She's shocked to see it's Jason, looking completely unhinged. He politely says he's sorry for disturbing her so late at night, but the sight already terrifies her, and he addresses the princess. As she tries to shut the door, the only thing she manages to pull off is the handle. He slices before she can close it. He cuts through the whole door too, blasting the girl back. When she falls, she realizes he's sliced all of that apart in a single instant. She recognizes it as a magic enchanted sword, and he's completely out of control. Locked onto her, he goes after the girl. Jason steps into the room, swinging his sword at her, and Israel demands to know how he dares act so insolently. She points out that he even attacked the royal guard. Then she asks how he dares break into her room, and Jason says that if someone blocks the path of a noble, they should be ready for the consequences. He also says her insolence started because she was rude to him first. According to him, she ignored his feelings, and then clung to some random guy who just showed up. She asks what he's even talking about. Did he really do all this over something like that? She says the Baron won't just sit back and watch, but Jason tells her that even now she's still waiting for that man. Then he says the man is dead, and the news leaves her shaken. Justin says he sent an elite assassin squad after him, and since those bastards finished the ambush by now, she probably couldn't even find the body. She thinks that's impossible, while he reaches toward her body. Terrified, she begs in her heart for the Proto to come, and he actually does, arriving with his aura. The moment that freezing presence appears, both of them are stunned. The Proto only stretches out his hand and sends out his key, dragging that idiot straight toward him. A wall is in the way, so Justin gets crushed through it, and bursts right through to Sol Mudok. The protagonist Mudok leaps at him, ready to strike, and while Justin is still in the air, he hurls the boy away. From inside, the princess sees the Peruna appear right in front of her, and asks if she's okay. Seeing him completely safe, she says yes, but the sword nearby is cursed and starts to float. She asks about him, and then the sword flies on its own, straight at the Peruna. He blocks it at once. Now he's fighting a flying sword, with no one even holding it. He wonders if this is a key control technique, and then the sword attacking him suddenly flies away and returns to its owner's hand. The Proto moves to Israel, holding her to protect her, and he starts to realize Justin has been preparing for this the whole time. The guy is already fully transformed, looking like a complete monster. Then he charges the Proto again, even with the princess there. When Justin's father learned his son wanted to defeat Blizzard, he took it seriously. Justin asked him to lend over his private assassin squad, and said those men could even kill a sword master, so everything would be fine. But his father refused, saying that still wouldn't be enough, and instead handed him that sword and that armor. The armor fused into the sword the moment he took it. His father warned that if he really wanted to kill him, he needed far better preparation. He gave the boy that cursed sword, and now Jason is using both its power and the armor it creates. The blade can change shape with the user's mana and form magical armor, so this is no normal weapon, it's a magic sword. Mudok quickly moves the princess out of harm's way. As the boy charges again, a burst of mana shoots toward the castle, aimed straight at Mudok. Jason is sure that attack would kill even a grandmaster, but after the blast, he just starts laughing, and pulls off his helmet, acting all pleased with himself. He really thinks he did something, asking if Mudok liked that hit, since this time he attacked much better than before. He's even glad those bastards failed. Mudok did take some wounds from the attack, but he's still alive. Jason celebrates that failure, because now he gets to finish Mudok himself. Meanwhile, Mudok gets back up. The princess points out that his arm is bleeding, but he tells her to stop. He tells her to stay back and get somewhere safe, so she asks if he'll come back. Mudok looks at her and gives a small smile, telling her to hide and wait for him. Then he jumps after that guy. He walks straight toward Jean. Mudok says he's changed. Compared to last time, Jason puts the helmet back on and hides himself behind the armor again. But Mudok says he still has no real meaning in his existence. The boy rushes him again and throws the sword, asking if Mudok is still going to keep giving those useless lessons. Mudok calmly knocks the sword away. This time, it doesn't touch him at all. He doesn't even move, and Jason charges in after it. Grabbing the sword again, he attacks at point-blank range, but Mudok blocks it with raw ki alone, forming a shield between himself and the blade, blasting the boy back. Mudok also jumps aside. Jason snaps that he's done playing around, and attacks more and more wildly, but Mudok keeps stopping every strike with just his ki. Jason thinks this next hit will finish him. Now he's got him, or so he thinks. He figures Mudok got tired after fighting the assassin squad, and this is the perfect chance to kill him. He declares this is Mudok's end, and comes in with a direct killing blow, but Mudok simply hits back with even greater force. Using his icy ki, he shatters the boy's sword, and knocks it right out of his hand. Jason can't believe it. His eyes go wide, and the armor drops him back to normal. Mudok notices it's the same injury as before, piercing his arm again. Jason falls to his knees, clutching that ruined arm, and screaming in pain. Mudok tells him this is how it should be. At this distance, he won't be able to attack Ezreal Day. Jason asks if Mudok took those hits on purpose, just to pull him away from the princess. Mudok says even a trapped rat will bite a cat. If you leave your enemy no way out, he'll do anything to survive, and a rat like him might have hurt Ezreal. Jason tries to transform again, furious that Mudok still dares to look down on him, but then Mudok steps in, places a hand on the boy's chest, and calls up his ki. He says no, he's just being careful. He can't risk losing her. Then his ki rises so powerfully that it lights up the whole forest in one strike. Everything freezes, and the boy's transformation is undone. He drops to his knees in front of Mudok. As the cold takes over and his body starts breaking apart, he asks what happened. His mana is gone, and he can't gather it anymore. Mudok tells him it's useless. He just destroyed his Dantian. From now on, Jai's 10 will never be able to gather or use mana again. That's the start of his endless nightmare. He trembles in front of Mudok, crying and screaming in fear, but Sid-Al Mudok slaps him across the face and sends him to the ground. He tells him to spend the rest of his life regretting everything. A man who preyed on the weak will now learn what it means to be weak himself. Then the sun rises in front of Mudok. He's glad to see another day begin and says it's already morning. He should head back now. She must be waiting for him. Honestly, this is cinema. He didn't kill him. He gave him something worse than death. Now he'll live like a pathetic wreck, and his father will probably throw him out too. After that, Jackson and all his men were arrested. His plans ended here. Now he's left like this, with all his mana gone, thinking it can't be real, and asking why and how it happened. Mudok thinks the only thing left now is to meet Ezreal, but when he gets back home, he finds them all gathered around with Jerome. Seeing that, he wonders what kind of scene this is. Already annoyed, 15 minutes earlier, he had called everyone to search for something, saying whoever found it would get a big reward. Jerome explains, he was attacked by assassins there, and lost his necklace. Mudok says that's right. Jerome says those men looked pretty skilled, asking how Mudok got away without a scratch after facing them. Mudok questions that, and says they weren't skilled at all. They were only good at staying quiet. Other than that, they were weak. He adds that if he hadn't been distracted, they wouldn't have left even a scratch. Jerome answers with obvious sarcasm, saying of course he's amazing. Then Ezreal shows up and says, just as she thought, this was all his fault. Mudok is surprised to see her there, and Jerome quickly tries to hide himself. She starts crying in front of Mudok, saying that if she had searched sooner, she would have found him already. Instead, he had to come save her, but he tells her that's not it. If anyone is to blame, it's that bastard Justin. Then he looks at Jerome and asks, isn't that right? The moment she hears that name, she's shocked. She runs up to him, takes his hand, and asks if he's Count Jerome von Kyrian. She heard he had gone missing, so why is he here? Mudok is already getting irritated by this, while Jerome says he just happened to end up here. He tells Her Highness he understands she's happy, but this kind of excited touching is a little dangerous for him. He can feel death breathing down his neck. That feeling only gets stronger as Mudok wraps an arm around his neck, full of rage, veins popping. Mudok says the two of them seem awfully close, and asks Jerome about it with a very unfriendly look. Jerome quickly says it's not what he thinks, but Mudok asks if he's serious, because that's definitely not how it looked. Then the princess's maid leans in and whispers that it would be wise to clear up this misunderstanding right away. After all, her current man is pretty high-strung. He might really kill someone. The princess hesitates about that, and sometime later, Mudok is surprised to learn Jerome was the person the princess respected most. She says that's right, and that the count was an amazing person. He was a true noble who cared about the people. She was heartbroken when he was exiled to that barren land, and he has no idea how sad she was when she heard he had disappeared. Mudok is surprised that happened to him, and says Jerome never told him any of that. Jerome shrugs and asks, who goes around bragging about their own good deeds? But then Mudok asks why she's talking about him in the past, and the princess starts blushing. She tells Mudok it's because she met him. Then the two of them fall into a soft, awkward little moment. When he calls out to her, the princess suddenly runs off, saying she was looking for his necklace and that she'll go search for it, then hides. The maid chases after her, while Mudok is left there with Jerome, who almost dies from the tension, so she hides away trying to cover how shy she is. But when she stops, she ends up finding Mudok's pendant. She speaks to Rensa and asks if the necklace the Baron was looking for was that one. Rensa says, yes, that's the one, and says she'll call the Lord right away. But then the princess remembers Mudok's reaction and realizes this necklace must be tied to someone named Hua Yian. At that, the maid looks at the princess and says that she has the exact same expression Lord Blizzard had earlier. Those two really are soulmates. The princess asks if she's serious, and the maid says yes. She tells her not to rush. Just like the princess thinks of him, she's sure the Lord carries her in his heart too. The girl starts to smile, thinking that at first she was jealous, but now she's curious. What kind of woman managed to win the heart of someone so wonderful? And when she hands it back to him, she wonders what kind of person Hua Yian was. Back in the past, Hua Yian's own father got furious over that lover's flower. He ordered it removed at once. He said it was just a flower that blooms with true love, and that all of that was nonsense. He reminded her she already had a fiancé. Then he told her to stop getting distracted by such foolish things and prepare for the marriage he arranged. But she tells her father that he's the one who needs to open his eyes. She says couples who make the love lotus bloom are known by everyone as soulmates. Even after seeing that miracle, he's still talking about a political marriage. She says that to him, his alliance matters more than his own daughter. He burns with rage but holds himself back. Then she says he abandoned her mother for that alliance, just like he's about to do with her. He cuts her off and orders the guards to seize her immediately. He makes sure she won't go to the ice palace before the wedding, keeping her under watch. As the guards grab her, she thinks she never should have come back, and calls for Kao. Kao Anisis wakes up in fright from that. She looks at the sun and wonders if it was just a dream. Later, at the hot spring with her maid, she asks herself who that woman in her dream was. Still shaken, Sakal sees the Baron come over and ask if something is wrong. She quickly says no and asks when he got there. Even while saying she's fine and telling him not to worry, she still looks down. He notices right away, so he suggests they take a walk to clear her head. Sakal is confused and the maid is too. Then the Baron calls a wyvern over. The maid nearly panics, while MC just stares in surprise. She asks about the ice wyvern, and honestly, the poor maid is definitely not paid enough for this. He says she's never seen so many tamed wyverns. He explains they were raised from when they were little, so they're gentle and she has nothing to fear. Then Jerome shows up. He arrives with another man and tells the Baron everything is ready. The Baron nods and asks if he prepared that too. Jerome says yes and tosses something over. The maid jumps again, but it turns out to be a tiny fluffy creature, and Jerome apologizes for scaring her. He says it's a yeti. Sakal asks if he means that legendary tribe from the snowy plains. She says she never thought they'd be this small and cute, then picks it up and plays with it. Jerome is glad she likes it and glances at the Baron. The Baron quietly praises him for the good work. A little earlier, he had warned Jerome that Sakal might get scared if she saw a real yeti, so he told him to shrink it with magic. Jerome complained that magic can't do everything. Still, he somehow managed to turn the yeti into the fluffy little ball the protagonist is holding. The Baron smiles when he sees her happy again. Then he asks if they're ready to go. He says something to Lilith, the yeti. MC gets ready to climb up. The Baron reaches out his hand and tells her to hold on. Sakal hesitates for a moment, then places all her trust in him. Together they lift off. They rise into the sky for a ride with just the two of them. Sakal admits she's scared. It's her first time flying this high, but if she's with him, she feels like she'll be okay. The Baron tells her to try opening her eyes, and she gathers her courage. When she looks out, She sees the world above the clouds and the sunset stretching before her. She thinks it's beautiful, and he asks if she's feeling a little better now. That catches her off guard. He'd been worried about her the whole time. She tells him yes. Thanks to him, she does feel better. Then he tells her to hold on tight. She doesn't get why at first, and the next second, he speeds up hard. Sometime later, they return, and one of the hunters complains that he should have said he was coming. They point out they were too far away for that anyway. He tells them to report everything to Jerome. Jerome asks if he's leaving all of it to him, and the Baron says he's going to have dinner with Sale at a nearby restaurant, so they need to finish before he gets back. The hunter accepts the order, though Jerome wonders if his opinion means nothing. Meanwhile, he is taking in the view and loving the place. The Baron asks what she thinks, and she says she loves everything she's seeing, but when she glances to the side, she notices the flower design on the Baron's necklace feels familiar. It reminds her of the dream she had, and she drifts off in thought until Sickles called back to the moment. She apologizes and says she was thinking about a strange dream from last night. The Baron asks about it, and she says there were people in clothes she had never seen, living in strange houses. In that dream, she felt like she was around 20, a fair-skinned woman with dark hair and black eyes, but she always looked sad. She was in love with someone, yet her father kept pushing her into a political marriage. Still so brushes it off as just a weird dream and turns back to him. He forces a small smile, calls it a strange dream, and grips the necklace on his chest. Then she adds that if she remembers right, she called out to someone in that dream, and she thinks his name was Gaga. The moment he hears that, he freezes. In his whole life, only one person ever called him that, Hwayan. His chest tightens. Sammo asks if he's alright. He says yes, just distracted for a second, trying to hide how shaken he is. He tells her the food will get cold, and asks her to sit and eat. Then the protagonist says she has a favor to ask. She tells him that every time he calls her princess, it makes them feel farther apart, so if he's okay with it, she wants him to call her soul from now on. The Baron pauses, thinking of Hwayan, then he agrees. After that, the two of them sit down to eat, but then Jerome shows up. He speaks to the Baron, asking if he enjoyed the meal, and saying he just got back after finishing business with the Teston Company. That name surprises Cecil. She says she's never heard of it, and asks if a place like that exists in this kingdom. Jerome says he forgot to explain the Teston Company isn't in the kingdom of Drac, it's in the kingdom of Gaia, which shocks her even more. Gaia is explained as a powerful nation in the northwest, ruled by queens for generations, and known as the Nation of Women. Its all-female order is especially famous, strong enough to rival the Wyvern Knights of the Zeba Empire. Sol says she knew they had traveled far, but she never expected they were in Gaia, and she wonders if being there could cause diplomatic trouble. Jerome starts talking again, and she quickly apologizes and asks him to continue. He explains that the ice gold leather they export to Gaia is becoming very popular. Lucia noticed that and suggested the Carrion Association build a factory there to sell finished leather goods directly. Still, Jerome points out that the leather alone is already selling well, so he isn't sure they even need to make and sell processed goods too. But in Gaia, the queen and most powerful people are women. If they make clothes and bags, the noble women will love them. A trend will spread, and they'll make far more money than they do now. Lucia already knows Carrion's famous leather craftsman, and she says they can start right away once he gives the word. The Baron thinks putting Luda in charge was the right call. He says fine, he'll provide all the leather they need, so they should move ahead with the plan. Jerome agrees and says the leather is so popular that stock sells out the same day it arrives. Then something catches their attention, and everyone looks over in shock. The Baron asks what's going on. There's an explosion in the middle of the city. Jerome realizes it happened near his association. He warns that the wind could spread the fire to their building. The Baron says he'll check it out and tells Jerome to stay with Sewell. Jerome asks if he's really going alone, saying it's too dangerous. MC says she's going too, but he tells her he'll only be a minute and will come right back. Then he heads out at once, using his icy power. As soon as he leaves, Sewell says they're going too, and Jerome asks what she means. She says they can't just sit there doing nothing, which leaves him stunned. She tells them to hurry and follow the balloon, and Jerome can only stare, wondering what she's talking about. Down below, a woman is horrified that her shop is burning, crying that she gave her whole life to it. People fighting the fire shout for more water, because someone is still trapped inside. When the Baron arrives, the whole place is already engulfed, and the fire is much worse than he expected. Then Jerome and Sewell catch up and call out to him, making him turn in surprise. He apologizes, but says she was too worried to stay behind and wait. He doesn't even know how to scold her for it. If he were in her place, he would have done the same. Just then, he hears someone calling for help from inside. He stops and listens, trying to find where the voice came from. Sewell is stunned by what he does next. Without another word, he charges straight into the flames. He dives in through a window. Inside, he searches for the source of the voice. Then he starts freezing everything around him, using his divine ice palm to put out much of the fire. As he moves through the room and scans the area, he finds a woman collapsed on the ground. He rushes over, checks her, and sees that she's still alive. She's breathing, so he picks her up and gets ready to leave, telling her she's lucky. Surviving a fire like this is no small thing. Then part of the structure starts crashing down on him. As the building gives way, a sharp piece comes close to his eye, almost piercing it, but he stops it cold with his power. In the same moment, he freezes the whole building and kills the fire instantly. Watching from outside, Jerome figures that kind of magic has to be 8th or maybe even 9th circle, and he's terrified by just how strong the Baron is. Then the Baron walks back out with the woman in his arms. Sewell can only stare. He really looks like a hero. Elsewhere, 2 people are speaking to a prince, reporting signs of rebellion. He asks what they mean, wanting to know who would dare stand against him. But while that man is talking to the noble, he suddenly blacks out. When he wakes up, he's in front of the Baron. Meanwhile, the rescued woman opens her eyes and asks where she is. Everything around her is completely different from where she was before. She gets up, leaves the room, and finds everyone sitting together and eating, which only confuses her more. Lilia notices she's awake and asks how she's feeling. She asks where this is, acting pretty smug. Lilia tells her it's the Carrion Association. She says she recently heard about a group getting famous for leather trade, then wonders why nobody recognized her. So she asks if no one there is from King Nogai. Lilia says no, they're from Carrion Village, north of the Kingdom of Drac. That's why the association is called Carrion. Then she asks who saved her, and Lilia points to the man sitting right there, their lord. It was Baron Blizzard. He just keeps eating like nothing happened. She turns to look at this Baron, asks if he was the one who saved her, and thanks him in a very casual way. Then she introduces herself as Schiller McMahon. The 2 of them hear that name and freeze in surprise. Lilia is shocked too, but Sale doesn't really know who she is. She calls him an idiot, saying she told him to study up on the kingdom of Gaia. Then she explains that Princess Schiller is Gaia's 2nd princess. She reached master level at 25, now leads the royal order, and is the most famous person in the kingdom. After that, they apologize for being rude. Lilia addresses her properly as Your Highness, but Schiller lets it slide. Since they aren't from Gaia, she says she'll ignore the fact that they didn't recognize her. Even so, Schiller thinks this is the worst kind of meeting. If her identity gets out, it could turn into a diplomatic mess. She starts trembling, and Saul notices. Schiller says she'll personally reward him for saving her life. Once they finish eating, he should come to the palace with her. The protagonist politely refuses. He says he needs to return to his land. That catches her off guard, and she blurts out what he means by that. Lilia immediately thinks this is bad, because refusing a reward from Gaia is seen as a serious insult. So she tries to smooth things over, saying her lord is probably just nervous in front of Princess Schiller. She needs to change the topic before this gets worse. Lilia asks how Schiller ended up in that building in the first place. That makes Schiller remember Baron Dayton. She gets angry thinking about how much she helped him, only for him to try to have her killed. Trying to sound calm, she says it was nothing much, just a coward too scared to face her directly, so he tried poison instead. Lilia is stunned hearing that. Schiller adds that setting the building on fire was probably meant to make sure she died. Still, she says she'll repay them for saving her, and tells them to name what they want. Salal asks about this reward, then just stares at her. That alone shakes her a little. MC says it looks like the one who wants something here is actually her. She flares up, calling him an insolent fool and asking if he's mocking her, but he's only talking about her stomach growling so loudly. Since she hasn't eaten since yesterday, she must be starving, and she really does dive into the food. While eating, she still can't believe he's turning down a reward from her. If he hadn't saved her life, she thinks she would have thrown them all in jail. But when she looks to the side, she notices the sword there and is surprised by it. She asks whose sword it is, and Sal says it's his. That tells her he knows how to fight with a blade. She guesses he might come from some noble knight family, and is captain of the royal order. She gets curious about his swordsmanship, so she suddenly raises her voice and orders him to duel her after the meal. He refuses right away, saying he has a personal rule. He doesn't duel people weaker than him. That makes her furious. Weaker than him? Does he not know she's a master swordswoman? She says many foreign knights used to avoid dueling her just because she was a woman, but it was always easy to make them accept in the end. Then she smiles at him and asks if he's scared of losing. At that, Israeldi, along with everyone else at the table, is left stunned, and Sedge really does take the bait. Honestly, that kind of taunt is hard to ignore. So he gets up, calls her outside, and already has his sword in hand. He's fully ready to put her in her place and says he'll teach her a lesson. Some taunts just work way too well. Outside, Schiller says the duel will follow night rules. No time limit, and the first one to force the other to surrender wins. Sedge Rule tells her to do whatever she wants. Jerome warns her not to forget she's Gaia's princess. If she gets even a scratch, this could become a diplomatic problem. She snaps back that she understands and tells Jerome to be quiet. Then she asks if they're done talking and calls out to the Baron. She says she's seen plenty of men like him before, and every one of them ended up losing and kneeling before her. Now she wants to see the look on his face when he loses too, and draws her sword to rush him. Then she pulls a dirty trick. She tilts her sword to catch the light and flash it straight into Sedriel's eyes, then attacks while he's blinded. But when her blade comes in, he stops it bare-handed, lifting one hand with perfect timing. She's shocked that he blocked her thrust so easily, so he wasn't bluffing at all. She spins and charges him again. Her next thrust cuts past his hair, but he only leans a little and slips clear of it. She keeps attacking faster and harder, while he calmly defends with one hand behind his back. The girl grows more and more ferocious, but Sedge Rule still looks completely at ease. As she throws out strike after strike, she realizes he's wasting almost no movement at all. Without any effort, he's deflecting every attack from a master swordswoman. Now she understands this man is insanely skilled, but she still keeps coming with different attacks. She swings upward, forcing Sedge to move as he jumps aside. She keeps pressing him, but when he starts to come down, she plants her foot in the ground and stomps at him. Sedge catches that attack with his sword and gets pushed back. After sliding away, he starts getting annoyed. He realizes she fights like a master of the piercing spear style from the Kingdom of Harmonization. Wild pressure and an endless rain of thrusts. She stays in that aggressive stance with her sword in hand, and the protagonist says that if they keep this up, the whole place will end up in ruins. Then they rush each other, and he decides to finish it in a single move, batting aside her attacks. When she comes in again with a kick, he strikes her in the stomach, grabs her by the neck, spins her around like a toy, and slams her head into the ground. She cries out, "Blizzard," just as he places his sword at her throat. She's completely stunned that he brought her down that easily. He tells her to admit she lost, but she refuses and demands another round. Jerome quickly steps in, clapping for both of them. He says they've already shown amazing swordsmanship, so why not end it here and go back to eating? Schuyler refuses. If Sedriel won't give her a rematch, she says she'll file an official complaint with the Kingdom of Drac. Everyone there's basically begging her in their heads to do anything but that. MC says accepting defeat is part of a warrior's honor, yet the actions of a nation's princess are no different from a child's, and she instantly asks what he said. Then she demands he repeat what he just called her. She asks who he thinks he is to talk to her like that, releases her aura and charges him, but Sedriel simply lifts his sword and brings the tip to the center of her forehead. She stops on the spot, unable to move past him. That's when she realizes she lost twice. She drops, thinking she didn't even see him move, and he asks if this is really how they thank someone for saving a life. Didn't that tiny brain of hers realize he'd been going easy on her because she was a princess? He tells her to think about who's really being rude. She stays on the ground, crushed, wondering why she can't beat him. If she loses like this, everything she built could fall apart. Then she remembers being a child. She ran to her mother with a medal, saying she got first place in the fencing tournament again. Her mother told her she was amazing, and that if she kept going, she'd be able to protect her mother and her sister. She told Sedriel to become Gaia's sword. So Sedriel lived her whole life as that sword, protecting the kingdom, becoming someone no one dared challenge, and pushing herself every step of the way to become that kind of person. But in front of Sedriel, she was made to feel like nothing. So who is this man? Just then, Israeldi calls out to the Baron. The protagonist calms down a little and says that from now on, Schiller should choose her opponents more carefully. Then he turns to Israeldi and says that since they're going back to Caroline tomorrow, they should finish what they were doing in town. She agrees. She gives Schiller one last uneasy look as they leave. Sedriel tells Jerome to have Jake buy some swords he can use, since all of his are getting worn out. Jerome says they'll be ready when he returns. As Schiller watches the two of them walk away, she calls Jerome and Isla over. She asks about the woman with the Baron, wondering if she's his fiancée. Jerome says no, actually he can't give details, but she's a noble from an extremely respected family. That gets Schiller thinking, especially since they still aren't married. Then she starts giving orders, telling Isla to bring a carriage because she's returning to the palace, and Isla quickly obeys. Schiller thinks that since becoming a master swordswoman, this is the first time she has met someone stronger than her, and she keeps turning over the name Blizzard in her mind, wondering if she would have grown into a different person if she had met him sooner. After getting back to the palace, she sent her most trusted knights to find Baron Dayton, but they found him dead in his cellar, with a letter in his hands. The note said his family had been taken hostage, the bottom was torn off, and the name of whoever gave the order was likely written there. After killing him, the murderer destroyed the proof. She says she kept searching for the one behind the attempt on her life, but found no name and no solid evidence. Even so, there was one person she strongly suspected, and she kept that person in mind. Back at the palace, her sister's maid announces that Schiller has arrived, and she allows her in. Royn is waiting in the garden. She's the first in line to the throne of the kingdom of Gaia. Smiling, she says it's been a while since she last saw her sister. This is Royn McMahon. When Royn hears what happened, she's shocked. Dayton had tried to kill her. Schiller says yes. He drugged her wine, then set the building on fire. If that person hadn't saved her, she would have died. Royn immediately calls for the guards and orders them to bring Baron Dayton in at once, but Schiller stops her. There's no point. By the time she confronted him, he was already dead, most likely silenced by the real culprit. Royn rushes over to her sister and pulls her into a hug, trying to comfort her. She says she thought Schiller would be fine because she's a master swordswoman, but she was far too careless. Still, she's glad she made it out safely, but honestly, that doesn't look like the face of someone happy for her sister. Schiller notices it too. Royn seems upset that she's still alive. Even though every clue pointed to Royn, Schiller wanted to be wrong since she still had no final proof, so she wonders if there's any way they can go back to how things used to be. Then she asks herself what that person would do in a situation like this. That gives her an idea, so she brings it up to Royn. Schiller mentions that Royn said she would join the royal delegation for the King of Drak's birthday. Royn says yes, and Schiller asks if she can go in her place. That catches Royn off guard. She says this isn't like Schiller at all. She never goes to events like that. Schiller can't stop thinking about the man who saved her. Since he's from the kingdom of Drax, she gets all shy about it. Royn looks surprised and asks if she wants to see him again. Schiller quickly denies it. Then the scene cuts away. Back home, the protagonist writes a letter. It's been 3 days since they returned from testing to Carolyn, and after Justin's attack, his valuable items like the Isovanner and the Icy Snowflower were at risk of being discovered by enemies. So official business and other public matters were moved to the castle. This is also the day Miss Souza is leaving and time has flown by. A lot has happened and Jerome warns him that Captain Schiller may strike soon, so they need to strengthen their forces fast. Still, the protagonist thinks today feels unusually calm. Then Jerome storms in carrying a pile of things, looking completely mad. He repeats that Captain Schiller could attack at any time and their military reinforcement plan needs to happen now. Gatton is on his side too. Then the princess arrives and admits she's worried as well. Since she's a princess of Gaia, she's afraid this could turn into a diplomatic issue. The protagonist thinks for a moment, back in the Central Plains, especially during his time with the Martial Alliance. He saw that kind of proud look many times, the look of a true martial artist. If it's really her, she won't let this leak outside. So he tells the princess not to worry. He believes he was right and he's sure she understood that too. But if anything happens to her, she should use that to contact him. She's startled. He explains that it's a communication stone, made from a mana stone. It lets people talk from far away without needing to be a mage. It even works all the way from the capital to here and she can hardly believe it. He tells her she can reach him anytime. As she gets ready to leave, her maid urges her to hurry along. He adds that communication stones still aren't known to the world, so she needs to be careful and only use it when she's alone. And if Justin notices anything, Jake will be watching her from the skies. She can tell at a glance that the item is precious, and his handwritten letter makes it even clearer how much he values her. She thanks him, then she leaves. Watching her go, he thinks about how he's only a baron right now. Between him and Princess Hild, the gap is as wide as heaven and earth. If he wants to become a man worthy of her, he has to raise his status. He decides it's finally time to go to that place. And Jerome is stunned. He looks around in disbelief, staring at all the people lying on the ground and asking who they are. The protagonist says they're the assassins who tried to kill him. Justin asks if these are the same assassins he brought, and the protagonist says exactly. Then Justin asks if he knows they're alive, but the answer is no. He probably thinks they're all dead. The protagonist is disappointed in them. He locked them up without food to test how long they could endure. And it's only been 10 days, yet they're already falling apart. Compared to the assassins from the Central Plains, their survival skills are pathetic. Still, one of them catches his eye. He notices that at least two of them seem decent enough, so he tells Jerome to call Schwartz and bring them food. Jerome thinks that's strange, but agrees. Meanwhile, the protagonist figures it'll take a long time before these guys become useful. After they eat, they finally recover a little. Jerome asks his lord why he kept them alive. The protagonist says he's thinking of turning them into his own assassin squad. Jerome is shocked and asks why he'd make something like that. Then a thought hits him. He assumes the protagonist plans to send assassins before Gaia can attack. Because if not, a wyvern unit plus an assassin squad can only mean one thing: rebellion. So he asks what in the world he's planning to do. Jerome acts like the protagonist is about to start another world war, when really, he just wants to reach the girl he loves. Inside the abandoned mine, Jerome keeps freaking out, saying that a wyvern unit and now an assassin squad is going way too far. He says they only passed inspection because of the princess's visit, but next time they could be branded traitors. While Jerome keeps ranting beside him, the protagonist is focused on what the princess asked, whether he would attend His Majesty's birthday. He says he plans to use the king's birthday as a major turning point to step into the center of politics, leaving Jerome even more shocked. Then he says that if Hilda is a princess, he needs to become at least a duke. To do that, he'll have to face many enemies, and an assassin squad is obviously necessary. He turns to Schwartz and asks if he has gathered the entire Glacial Storm Knight's order, and Schwartz says yes. Just as ordered, they're stationed at the entrance. Schwarzgale is the captain of the Glacial Storm Knights. Then the protagonist addresses the assassins and gives them two choices: become his subordinates or die. But he also says their skills are far too pathetic for them to serve under him as they are, which shocks everyone there. So he prepared training to whip them into shape. First, they have to pick one of the weapons behind him. Then they must go outside, hunt the knights, and survive while the knights hunt them back. 3 weeks later, the knights are cornered as the assassins rush in and attack, but the knights stop them with ease, nearly taking them out. In the middle of the clash, one knight simply snatches the assassin's brooch. He declares the kill and celebrates that they won't miss dinner tonight, while the assassin looks crushed. Then the knight tells him to go sit down. Watching it all, the protagonist reflects that it's been 3 weeks since the joint training between the assassin squad and the Glacial Storm Knights began. The rules are simple. Every person gets a brooch, and if it's stolen or broken, that means you're dead. Whichever side loses all its brooches, loses. It sounds simple, but a little competition is one of the best ways to train two groups at once, and both sides needed it. Then he notices it starting again on the other side. All the assassins were marked with one of Jerome's tracking spells, so if any of them leave the chosen area, an alert goes off, and one of them tries to run. The protagonist says this is the 10th time Miller has tried to escape. 10 times already, and he's sure he warned him that next time, he'd kill him. Miller snaps that he doesn't have time for these games, and tells the protagonist to get lost. He can't even finish before he's knocked out almost instantly. Baker shows up after putting him to sleep, apologizing and asking to be forgiven just this once. The protagonist asks why Miller is so desperate to escape, and Baker explains that Miller said he needs revenge. So the protagonist asks what kind of revenge. Baker says Miller is different from the others, who became assassins for money. When he was young, his whole family was murdered, and he was the only one left alive. He recently learned that the person who killed them will attend a party in the capital next month. The protagonist realizes that party must be His Majesty's birthday celebration. Sometime later, Miller wakes up. The protagonist is in the room with him and says the birthday celebration in Drac will be guarded by hundreds of mages and knights. Does he really think he could pull off an assassination alone? Miller asks if the leader told him. Then he says he's lived only for revenge, and if he can kill his enemy, he doesn't care what happens to him after that. Sol tells Miller the king's birthday party will be packed with guards. He won't even get close to his target, let alone take revenge. If he dies like that, it'll mean nothing. Miller realizes MC is right. Then he says that as a noble, he can get into the party. Miller asks what he means by that. The protagonist offers him a deal. He'll help Miller get his revenge. In return, he wants Miller's complete loyalty. Miller asks why him when there are plenty of assassins better than he is. But MC remembers what Baker said. Miller became an assassin master at just 25. MC sees his talent too. He still thinks Miller is weak right now, but he knows he'll get much stronger. That's why he wants him in the squad he's building. And he asks if Miller will accept. Miller remembers the tragedy he went through, and with no other path left, he lowers his head to the protagonist. He says that if Sale helps him get revenge, he'll do anything for him. The deal is made, and Mudok says they'll leave in a few days, so Miller should get ready. Just then, Savina calls for MC. She says the ice cream is ready, and Miller is instantly stunned by her. He calls her over, saying they should hurry before it melts. Miller stays behind, wondering who that woman was. Elsewhere, at Junshin's house, his father tears into him, asking if he really lost even with that valuable artifact. Junshin tries to say that guy was just too much for him, but his father shuts him up. Junshin just stands there, completely downcast. Meanwhile, his father thinks about Blizzard and calls him a continuing nuisance. He turns to Roxelin and asks if he can handle it. Roxelin tells Duke not to worry, he'll make sure to finish off the Baron. At the same time, Max gives Sale a report. That's when the protagonist learns they need to move 6,000 new citizens from beyond Toph to Carillon, and that they've collected 6 Alvis of Waven. MC says that's exactly right. He asks when they'll do it, then says they can settle that part with Jerome later. For now, there's something more important to deal with. Jerome asks what it is. Sale admits he doesn't know what gift to give the king, and everyone is shocked. Mudok asks why they all reacted like that. He says it at least has to be better than Duke Icarus' gift, so if anyone has ideas, speak up. Max suggests ice ogre leather, since merchants like it, and winter is coming, so His Majesty would probably enjoy it. The protagonist says that's too ordinary, and asks for something else. Another person suggests flowers, and Sale asks if he's being mocked, but the man quickly explains he doesn't mean normal flowers. He means icy snow flowers, which only grow in Corello, making them special. Jerome points out that because they only grow in free steam, it would be impossible to raise them in the capital. Then the squad leader says that leaves only one option. The others ask what option he means, but before he can explain, someone rushes in calling for the Baron. He says he can't take this anymore. That bastard blocked every road. Sale asks who Jake is talking about, and tells him to explain calmly. Jake says it's Viscount Hoxland of Toph. They've put up with unfair tolls and usage fees before, but this time he completely blocked the roads. MC asks if they can't just use the wyverns to get past it, but Jerome explains wyverns can only carry so much, so land roads still matter. To reach the capital, they have to pass through Toph. Since their enemies don't know about the wyverns, blocking the roads was their plan, and doing it right before the nobles' gathering means they're trying to stop Sale from attending. He figures that man must be hiding something, and wonders why he's making this move. Jerome believes the Viscount built his power through Duke Icarus' influence, and since Justin returned not long ago, Icarus is probably behind this. The protagonist quickly decides they have no choice. If they want to provoke him, he'll answer back. Jerome nervously asks if MC is thinking about a territorial war, and MC asks what's wrong with that. Jerome explains that war between feudal lords is handled by the lords themselves, and as long as imperial law isn't broken, the king can't interfere. Still, to start a territorial war, they need to notify the king. They also have to officially declare war on their opponent. The one exception is if the war ends before the king is informed. Then they can report it afterward, once the enemy has already surrendered. Selma thinks the timing is perfect. It's the best chance to test that. He orders SWAT to gather the smallest force possible, get the territory ready, and prepare to move out. SWAT agrees at once. Then he says the 4 assassin squads will stay on standby for now, and Miller alone will scout Toph. Max agrees. The protagonist then tells Jake to prepare the Wyvern unit too, and Jake asks what the protagonist is talking about. He points out his unit only has 20 people, and asks if that's really enough to start a territorial war. Sale fires back, asking if he's really the commander of the Wyvern Knights. Even after spending so much time with them, he still doesn't trust their power. Jake pauses, because MC is right. He used to be pathetic, but his wyverns are not weak, so now he's going to show everyone what those wyverns can really do. Sale tells Jerome to write a declaration of war for the tyranny against Saruman's people, and for blocking their passage. Jerome says no. He is about to keep talking, then realizes Jerome really did refuse. Jerome says betting on a victory they aren't sure of means gambling with their people's lives, and that's far too reckless. He warns that Viscount Roxlin is holding around 6,000 civilians hostage, so if they attack first, those people will be in danger. Toph also has 10 times more soldiers than they do, and if the Duke joins in, the gap gets even worse. Sale asks for 2 days. He says before the enemy can even react, this war will already be over. Jerome is stunned, saying that's impossible, but Sale reminds him that he's the strategist, so he shouldn't look that unsure in front of the soldiers. Jerome starts to think that if it's the protagonist, maybe he really can go beyond expectations and pull off another miracle. He enters the Knight's Hall and orders all the soldiers to prepare to depart. Then he says this is their declaration of war. In the city, Sel is heading too, Several people are being arrested. The guards tell one man to keep moving, and he asks what crime they even said he committed. A soldier presses a sword to his neck and says anyone coming from Caroline will be captured by order of the Viscount. Back at the Viscount's mansion, a report comes in that all residents from Caroline have been arrested as ordered. The Lord asks if anything unusual happened. The man reporting says the merchants who used to come through the gate have stopped showing up. The Lord calls them fools, and says they finally realize the gate won't be opened. Caroline's frozen land depends on buying food from other regions, and without passing through Toph, there's no way to reach the capital because of the mountains, so Caroline must already be suffering from food shortages. At the nobles' gathering that every aristocrat is supposed to attend, if Blizzard doesn't even show up at the banquet held by the king's rival, he'll lose his title as lord. The Viscount gets excited imagining Blizzard being exiled, convinced Caroline will be his after that. He basks in his perfect plan, saying that going against Duke Icarus, whose power even surpasses the king's, is the same as treason, and if he handles this well, he might rise to count, or maybe even marquis. Then he suddenly notices a shadow inside the castle. Both men freeze in fear because it's a wyvern. It pushes into the castle, and comes right up to the lord, leaving him shocked to see a wyvern there. He asks why a beast found only near Lazar Mountain is in his city. Sol is riding on top of it like it's nothing. He casually asks if that overgrown lump in front of him is Rocksling. The lord demands to know who he is, and orders him to identify himself at once. MC says he's the lord of Caroline. Rocksling stiffens the moment he realizes this is Baron Blizzard. Sol pulls something from his clothes and flicks it toward Rocksling, slicing part of his ear with it. It lands on the floor. It's a letter. He tells him this is his declaration of war, then says he'll be back in an hour. Rocksling is left trembling in fear, one ear cut open. The soldiers rush in, calling for the Viscount and asking if he's okay, but Viscount Rocksling just stands there shaking, staring outside. Soldier leaves on his wyvern and heads back to his men. He looks completely calm, standing on top of the beast as it moves. The others stare in confusion, asking if that was really a wyvern and why one was there. Rocksling is terrified. He looks at a soldier and suddenly lashes out, knocking him to the floor. The soldier asks why the Viscount is doing this, but Rocksling keeps beating him. He calls them useless bastards and asks if they get paid for nothing. Where were they when the enemy came right into his home? Everyone else turns away, not wanting to be next. After stomping the man until he's tired, Rocksling orders them to dress the prisoners in soldier uniforms and hand them weapons. Someone asks if he really means military gear. Rocksling says yes and starts ranting about that bastard Blizzard. He wants to see Blizzard's face when he realizes he's killing his own people. Once again, he's come up with another cruel plan. His advisor can only watch as Rocksling does whatever he wants. Then Rocksling walks over to the letter. Sail drove into the ground. He picks the letter up off the floor. Then he rips it to pieces, furious that Baron Blizzard dared to declare a territorial war on him. He orders the Knights of Toph to be called, and they gather around the palace. Right there, he officially declares war on Caroline. He promises rewards too. Whoever earns the most glory in battle will get a share of his wealth and power. That sends the knights into a frenzy. While he's still shouting, Sail's assassin hidden among the soldiers asks his lord if he heard that. The protagonist is listening through their magic communication device and says he heard every word, loud and clear. He gets ready with his wyvern knights. You'd have to be insane to see a whole swarm of giant lizards coming your way and still think heavy armored soldiers can stop them. That's just plain stupid. Back in the middle of the city, with the prisoners, they really are given weapons and forced to fight even though they don't want to. There are even children mixed in with them. Roxy thinks so well attack and end up killing his own people, driving him into despair. But soon the wyverns really do arrive with MC at the edge of the territory. Then he orders the attack to begin. His whole force charges in with the wyverns leading the way. The prisoners dressed as soldiers stare up, wondering what they're seeing. Roxy is terrified because a pack of wyverns has appeared in the distance. Even his knights freeze in fear. Then the wyverns drop stones from above onto the fortress, smashing Roxy's stronghold from overhead. A lot of soldiers die in the attack, but the prisoners below are about to get hit too by the falling rocks. Then a blue glow appears over a woman holding her child, and when she turns, she sees Senno's mage. Shiromi steps in and calls on the Glacial Storm Knights, warning them that the soldiers outside the castle are Caroline's citizens, so the first unit must evacuate their people. The rest are told to push through the broken wall. It's time to show Toph's soldiers the strength of Caroline, and they do, cutting down everyone in their path. Roxley starts panicking, wondering how they knew about the fake soldiers at the gate. Meanwhile, the wyverns keep hunting down Toph's real troops, and Roxley can't believe Caroline got this strong. The wyverns really are what changes the whole war. From above, so on sees everything unfold. Then he jumps down into the middle of the knights, landing lightly in front of them. He stares them down without flinching. They're shocked, asking where he even came from. He just appeared in front of them all alone, so they decide to rush him together. But Siddle only gathers icy power at his fingertips, and cuts through the group in a flash. He kills them calmly, freezing them where they stand. Soon there's a line of bodies behind him. Siddle figures there's only one target left now, their cowardly lord, who's already fleeing toward the mountains. A few soldiers still try to protect him. Roxley screams at them to fight, but they're all shaking in front of that monster. He demands to know if they can even call themselves knights. Then he says he already sent for Duke Icarus' help, and if they just hold out until reinforcements arrive, victory will be theirs. He keeps clinging to that hope, but the soldiers finally understand what's happening, so they turn around and attack Roxley instead. One of them throws him away, and as they run, they tell him if he wants to die, he can die alone. Roxley shouts that it's an order, and they have to come back. But right behind him, a giant wyvern eye is staring straight at him. Saul calls Lilith back before she can eat him, joking that trash would only give her food poisoning. Then he walks up to the trembling pig, and Roxley addresses Baron Blizzard, admitting he was wrong and lowering his head, saying the loss is his. He begs for mercy, claiming he had no choice because Duke Icarus ordered him to do it. But then Jake arrives with a soldier clamped in his wyvern's mouth, and says he caught the man who was heading to Duke Icarus. Roxley goes pale. His whole plan just fell apart. Seal tells him it must have been hard to keep pretending for so long. Then he says that for daring to hunt down his people, he sentences him to death. The protagonist strikes with an ice-covered hand, but Roxley blocks it with a mana shield. Jake is shocked that he managed to stop Seal's attack, but Misai looks past him to the real one responsible, wondering what Jerome thinks he's doing. Jerome is the one who protected that pig. He keeps his spell going, without a hint of regret. Then Jerome addresses him as his lord and says, "No matter how awful a noble's crimes are, only His Majesty the King has the right to decide that noble's fate." The protagonist glares at him, still furious, and Jerome warns that killing Viscount Roxley here could put the protagonist's own position at risk. Roxley quickly agrees, insulting MC, then thinks help should be arriving any second, and someone really does show up. Roxley smiles, thinking that person finally made it. He turns and calls out for Valmer. Now grinning, he mocks you all as a fool, and asks if he really thought only one soldier was sent to Duke Icarus. He says a territorial war has to be reported to the king first, and carried out with a royal observer present. Since he never reported it to the court, Roxley sent Valmer to the capital instead. He says the protagonist tried to beat him before the king found out, but his greed ruined everything and he starts laughing. Jerome, though, thinks that makes no sense, because guards were stationed on the road to the capital. He wonders how Valmer got through. Seal, on the other hand, grows calmer and smiles at Roxley. Roxley asks what's so funny. Has MC lost his mind? Then he says he can reveal his identity now. That man says he'll do as he pleases and peels off the skin on his face right in front of them. And it turns out it was Miller in disguise. Roxley stares in shock, asking what this is and how long he's been like that. Miller tells the protagonist the mission is complete, and the protagonist explains there's a clause in the territorial war law. You can declare war without reporting it to the king, if your enemy has broken imperial law, and Roxley already did. Roxley is terrified, because MC points out that he used Carolon's citizens as slaves, and slave trading is banned in the Drac Kingdom. Still charging Icy Key into his hand, Seal moves toward that arrogant pig. Roxley panics and asks if he has any idea what it took for him to get this far. If he loses Toph and his title, he'll have nothing left, and he can already feel Duke Icarus breathing down his neck. He's sure the Duke will kill him. Desperate and drooling with fear, he turns and runs, but when he looks back, he realizes there's something even more dangerous than Duke Icarus right behind him. Seal stomps the ground, sending out a trail of ice that blocks the pig's path and freezes his foot in place. Then the protagonist tells him to grit his teeth and closes in. A massive punch lands. It's the kind of hit that sends someone flying in one blow. Seal launches that pig a huge distance, smashing him up badly. Roxley drops unconscious. Everyone watches in stunned silence. Then Seal declares that the winner of the territorial war is Carolon. His subordinates celebrate with him and all his people go wild over the easy victory. Later that night, MC explains that everything after that went smoothly. Roxley lost all his property, was expelled from his land, and disappeared a few days later. The city of Toph became part of Carolon, and Jerome was offered the job of managing the new district. but he flat out refused, saying he already had too much work and would go on strike if they dumped that on him too. So Seal asks who should take charge instead, and Jerome thinks for a moment, remembering someone. Then he says he knows the perfect person. On his recommendation, Bulma Roxley's former vassal was put in charge of Toph. Of course, they still don't fully trust him, so 2 knights are assigned to watch him and report every day. Time passes, and soon it's the birthday of Tamalova III. The whole kingdom is filled with a festive mood. At the castle, the guards grumble because they want to enjoy the festival too, and one tells the others to stop whining since they heard a special bonus is coming. Then he notices a huge shadow moving across the sky and wonders where it came from. That's when he realizes, wyverns are arriving. The guards panic, yelling that it's a monster attack and telling someone to sound the alarm, but a voice tells them to wait. The owl arrives in person and introduces himself as Baron Blizzard of Carillon. They're stunned. One blonde guard wonders if this is the magic swordsman who saved his majesty, and whether those wyverns were actually tamed. He pulls out a letter from his clothes and says he came to meet his majesty. Yeah, he really came dressed for the occasion. Inside the luxurious mansion, everyone is dressed to impress and trying to get on the king's good side. Then a butler steps in and announces Baron Blizzard's arrival. Sitso enters and instantly steals the spotlight. Looking sharp, people stare and whisper that he's a charming man, wondering if he's the one who saved his majesty, the one rumored to use magic above the 5th circle. Then Schiller approaches him and says it's good to see him again. She asks how he's been and he says, same as always. After that, the conversation dies and an awkward silence takes over. She asks if he shouldn't at least ask how she's doing too, but he just hands her a drink. He says his assistant told him that at parties, ladies should be served first. Not really getting it, she still takes the drink and thanks him politely. Just then the butler makes another announcement. Princess Dauphin of the Kingdom of Rassan has arrived, along with Count Anos. The two of them walk inside, and yeah, the author really knows how to draw the girls in this series. Everyone turns to look, saying Princess Dauphin is as beautiful as ever. Others wonder if Count Anos is the same man promised to Princess Lyrat too, and say the two look perfect together. The Proto keeps watching with Schiller and starts thinking that Anos is the same man Edmund mentioned in his letter, the famous master swordsman. Schiller asks if he knows him. He says Anos somehow doesn't seem like he's from this world, though he's never seen him before, and Schiller brings up the woman who was with him last time, and wonders if they'll see her too. He asks if she's curious about that woman, but Schiller brushes it off and says she only asked because she doesn't know many people here, so he tells her to wait a little longer. She's always liked making a dramatic entrance. Soon the star of the party is announced. His Majesty King Tamalova III, ruler of the Kingdom of Drakata. He steps in with his daughters, and one of them is the very woman who had been with the Proto before. Schiller is shocked to learn that woman was a princess of Drakata. She asks if this is the dramatic entrance he meant. The princess goes to sit beside the king, but as she's about to take her seat, she looks ahead and spots the Proto standing with Schiller. That instantly makes her mad. Both of them notice her expression, while she wonders why Schiller is there. Wasn't the first princess supposed to come? On top of that, she really doesn't like seeing that woman near the Baron. Everyone offers congratulations for His Majesty's 50th birthday, and bows. Tamalova thanks them all and says he's grateful they came to celebrate with him. He says he hopes everyone enjoys the night. Then one of the princesses excitedly wonders what gift he'll get this year, and her father says it's time to begin. The first present is from Duke Akaros. From inside a box, he takes out a ring. He explains that the ring will protect the king by canceling any attack magic below the 4th circle. It's an artifact that shocks everyone, especially the king. They can't believe something like an artifact still exists. The protege wonders about that, and Schiller explains that an artifact is an item fused with magic. Since there are no more 9th circle mages, artifacts are priceless relics. One with high-level nullifying magic is beyond rare. Tamalova thanks Duke Ikaros for such an expensive gift, and the Duke simply offers his birthday wishes again. People say that as expected of Duke Ikaros. He brought something amazing, and now they wonder if any gift can top that ring. More expensive gifts are presented after that, but none of them surpass the Duke's. Last comes the Prota's gift. Baron Blizzard's inside a huge box that looks like it's made of ice. The Prota asks how he's doing. The king says he's glad to see him, and the Prota replies that it's all thanks to His Majesty's blessing. Then he says the gift he prepared is the hide of an ice ogre. He hunted himself. The king thinks it over. If it's an ice ogre, then he must mean that wild one from the northern lands. The Prosod confirms that's exactly the one. He says it's not much, but he hopes the king will accept his sincerity. Tamilova thanks him and says he'll have winter clothes made from the hide, but the Duke gets annoyed, saying such a cheap gift is fit for a commoner. The Prota says he also thought that alone would be too little, so he brought one more gift. Another box is brought in, this one smaller. When it's opened, everyone is stunned. They all wonder what it is. The Prota says they're monster eggs. That only shocks everyone more, and they start wondering why he would bring something like that here. Duke Akuros calls it deeply disrespectful, and says it's an insult to the royal family. He demands to know what the guards are waiting for, and orders them to throw Baron Blizzard out right away, but the king tells them to stand down. The whole room goes still as he asks the Prota to explain what this means. He answers that these eggs are wyvern eggs. That leaves them even more stunned. He actually brought wyvern eggs with him. The king tries to stay formal and asks for an explanation, but honestly, the Prota could probably crush everyone in that kingdom if he wanted to. He just doesn't, because he likes the king's daughter. It turns out these are ice wyverns, a species found only in Caroline. They're 1.5 times bigger than normal wyverns. Since ancient times, people have tried to tame them, but their savage nature makes getting the eggs hard, and raising them is even harder, so they were always seen as impossible to tame. But even normal wyverns, once tamed, become a huge military force. The small kingdom of Zeba used wyvern knights to conquer nearby lands, and became the Great Zeba Empire. That story is well known. In short, taming ice wyverns would massively boost Drax's military power. The king stares at the eggs in shock and says he's grateful for the gift, but asks if the Prota understands that raising a wyvern is even harder than getting its egg. The Prota answers that, just as His Majesty said, raising a wyvern isn't easy. Then, without saying much more, he whistles for Lilith. Everyone is stunned again. A wyvern appears outside, and the whole room freaks out at the sight of the monster by the window. He explains that this is a wyvern he raised from a hatchling, and he'll teach the royal handlers how to raise an ice wyvern. He adds that when one hatches, if they imprint His Majesty's face on it, it will recognize the king as its master and obey him loyally. He's also offering 2 of the eggs in honor of the princesses, so they can become guardians of the royal family. That moves the king. He's touched that the Prota thought not only of him, but of his daughters too, and says he's truly thoughtful. He says Drac now seems destined to become as powerful as the Zeba Empire, and calls this the greatest gift he's ever received. He thanks Baron Blizzard deeply, and the Prota says he's glad the gift pleased him. The princess is stunned, because a few days ago, before they lost contact, he told her to wait for something, and this is what he meant. Even Duke Icarus is furious, cursing under his breath, and wondering how the Prota got so many wyvern eggs. But then the Duke says he has something to report, something urgent for His Majesty. He asks if the king has heard that 2 days ago Baron Blizzard sent an army into Viscount Roxling's territory, and questions why Caroline would send troops to Toth. Then Duke Icarus declares that Baron Blizzard started a territorial war. The king is shocked by that news. So is everyone else in the hall, because starting a territorial war without reporting it to the court is a serious crime. Icarus says that a man arrogant enough to start such a war without even informing His Majesty deserves the harshest punishment. The Prota clearly doesn't like where this is going, and all eyes turn to him. The king thinks it over, because if this is true, then he's in a very difficult spot. The princess starts to worry at this rate the Baron's reputation will be ruined. Meanwhile, the Duke starts thinking it's over for the Prota, but then the Prota speaks up and asks the king if slave trading is allowed in the Kingdom of Dark. The king says no, anything involving slaves is forbidden. With that, the Prota pulls a document from his clothes and raises it, saying it's a record scroll containing all of Roxling's slave deals. Duke Icarus, the king, and even the princess are all stunned. He says Roxling captured people from his territory and sold them as slaves. After seeing his own people enslaved, how could he possibly hold back his anger? The room erupts and murmurs again, with people saying that can't be true. Duke Icarus is pushed into an even worse position. He curses Roxling as a greedy pig and wonders if he was selling slaves behind his back. The princess points out that criminals who break royal law can be challenged to a territorial war even without the king's approval, then asks her father if she's wrong. He says she isn't. Since there was a valid reason, he won't hold the Prota responsible. On top of that, he declares that Toph now belongs to Caroline. Everyone is pleased to hear that except the Duke. Then that blonde knight speaks up and says that since Baron Blizzard's land has grown, maybe it's time to give him a new title. The king agrees and calls the Baron forward. The Prota steps up and kneels. Then the king begins the ceremony and declares that from this moment on he is a Viscount. The Prota is overjoyed as he receives the honor from the king. The Duke hates every second of it, grinding his teeth in anger and swearing that no matter the cost, he'll destroy him. As he's leaving, that Duke Enos also looks bothered by everything that happened. Later outside, The prota is enjoying the breeze while thinking over everything that happened at the king's party. He says all those nobles crowding around kept him from talking to Israel. Even so, he finally managed to make some progress. He thinks back on everything he's been through since coming to this world, the people he met and even that big kiss from Israel. While he's out there alone, someone comes to meet him. Sale asks who it is. Right away, he has a bad feeling about the man. It seems to be Count Enos from the kingdom of Hazm, and he doesn't come in peace. The count says it took a long time, but he finally found him, calling the protagonist young Master Mudok. That shocks Sewell because the man is speaking the language of the Central Plains. Then the stranger makes it clear. MC is the enemy of his master and his sect. He says he's been wandering for a long time to find him, already ready for a fight. Then he draws his sword. He catches a familiar scent from it. It's the smell of plum blossoms, and he can hardly believe who this man might be. This has to be the disciple of the man the protagonist killed, the same one who warned that things would have gone differently if his student had been there. The protagonist remembers Gene Pagan mentioning him on his deathbed. This is the one known as the greatest genius in all the Central Plains, and he's furious with MC. Sword already in hand, he moves in and his name is Li Jinshin. Now this looks like a real fight, not just Sewell beating people who can't fight back. This time both sides might actually trade blows. At least he's finally up against someone who can hit back. I'm excited to see what happens next. If you want the continuation, like and subscribe here on this YouTube channel. And that's it.